The man had barely crossed into another world when his own sister shot an arrow straight through his heart. He thought the brother walking toward him was bringing a healing potion, but what that brother offered him was high-concentration sulfuric acid. When his father saw what was happening, he immediately stepped in to stop them. Then, as if it was perfectly normal, he crushed the man's bones to pieces. Because the place he had been reborn into was none other than the Demon King's household. Ever since childhood, the original owner of this body had been bullied by his siblings. He had once run to his mother in tears, but his mother told him that if he was born into a demon family, then he should learn to strike back like a demon. The original owner said that if he really did that, his siblings would definitely kill him. His mother only chuckled and said coldly, then he simply had to strike before they did. She also told him that his father had become the great demon king by killing 12 of his own brothers. The next second, she suddenly pulled a dagger from behind her back. Then, she drove it straight into the original owner's chest. She said that if someone wanted to kill him, this was how he should do it. Move faster than they could. When the man woke up again, it was already the next morning. During the night, he had mostly absorbed the memories of the original owner, Kayla. He checked his body and found that yesterday's wounds had almost completely healed. The maid beside him reminded him that he had slept much longer than usual this time. She said it was already time for the family meal, so he needed to get up. Through Kyla's memories, he recognized her as his personal maid, Linlin. The original Kyla had been more timid than his siblings, so everyone looked down on him and bullied him. Even Linlin, his own maid, despised him. Whenever he changed clothes, Linlin made him dress himself. Once, Kayla asked her why his brother's servants helped their master get dressed. Linlin answered that Kayla could help her get dressed too. She even dumped the work she was supposed to do onto Kayla instead. Then, Linlin herself would lie down on Kayla's bed and sleep. So, Kayla knew one thing for sure. This had to change. After getting dressed, he headed to the dining room. But the moment he sat down, Seldra, sitting across from him, suddenly kicked up her leg. A hidden dagger flew from her shoe, piercing straight through Kayla's calf. Pain shot through his entire body, making Kayla shudder on instinct. Seldra only smiled and said he looked a little low on energy, so he should eat more. Kayla knew that if these people discovered his true identity, he would die in the most miserable way possible, so he could only grit his teeth and quietly say that he understood. Then Kayla began eating the food in front of him. But the moment the food entered his mouth, a numbing jolt surged through his body like electricity. Seeing Kayla's reaction, Tom smiled and said that the soup had been prepared especially for him. Looking at the monsters sitting before him, Kayla finally made up his mind. They were demons. They were not his family. And in truth, this world was a game Kayla had once played. More importantly, he had once been the best map designer for that very game. So how could he let himself get trampled by demons inside a game he had helped design? With that thought, Kayla slowly lifted the spoon in front of him. The next second, he flung the soup straight into Seldra's face. Then he pulled the dagger out of his leg and hurled it right into Tom's arm. His father, who was still eating, froze the moment he saw it. The next second, Kayla shot to his feet, flipped the dining table over with raw force, and shouted that if the food was that disgusting, then nobody needed to eat it. That move stunned not only Seldra and Talm, but even his father stared at him in shock. After leaving the dining room, Kayla had only one thought in his mind. That felt incredible. Of course, because he had flipped the table, his father beat him half to death afterward. But thanks to the original Kayla's terrifying regeneration, he recovered almost immediately. This must have been the power of the Demon King's son. Now, Kayla wanted to know just how strong that power really was. At that moment, Linlin reminded him that his demon power class was about to begin and told him to hurry over. Kayla turned his head and said coldly that he knew, and that she should stop giving him orders from now on. That one sentence left Linlin completely speechless. In the original Kayla's memories, demon power class was one of the worst nightmares he had ever endured. Every time class began, those demons would find new ways to torment him. They were demons among demons. The original Kayla had once thought his own sister might at least try to stop them. But that woman did the exact opposite and told him not to hold back. In truth, the original Kayla had never been weak. He had simply been too soft-hearted. But now Kayla would make proper use of that power for him. Once class began, the teacher announced that Seldra and Tom would not be attending today. Then the teacher asked who had been paired for sparring in the previous lesson. A red-haired boy below raised his hand and said it had been him and Kayla. According to the rules, today would be their second sparring match. After both sides took their positions, the red-haired boy Rod smiled and promised not to beat Kayla to death. The moment he finished speaking, two laser-like short blades formed in Rod's hands. The students below immediately began whispering that Kayla was probably going to get beaten half to death again today. Some even joked that Rod should go easy on him and not make the young master cry. Hearing those words, Rod's smile grew even more sinister. In a way, the original Kayla's life was just like his own before crossing over. Both of them had been rejected and bullied by everyone around them. But there was one difference. The blood flowing inside Kayla belonged to the Demon King. When Kayla's aura erupted around him, Rod instinctively stumbled 2 steps back, unable to understand how Kayla could possess so much magic power. Everyone around them also stared in disbelief. Rod tried to retreat again, only to realize that Kayla's power was pressing down on him so hard he could not move. When Rod looked up again, Kayla had already clenched his fist and flashed right in front of him. The next instant, Kayla slammed his fist into Rod's face. The impact exploded with such force that it smashed a massive crater into the ground beneath Rod. It all happened so fast that many people did not even see what had happened. Even the teacher standing nearby was shocked. Rod lay on the ground after taking that punch, his entire face ruined beyond recognition. Kayla leaned down close to him and asked coldly what he had just said, and who had taught him to speak to the Demon King's son like that. Feeling the pressure coming from Kayla, Rod immediately begged for mercy again and again. Only then did Kayla stand up, looking down at him with ice-cold eyes as she warned him not to provoke her again, or he would die a miserable death. When the others saw Kayla rise, they all stepped back on instinct. As Kayla walked up to the teacher, he suddenly stopped. Then, he turned his head and calmly asked why the class was not continuing. Linlin, standing behind him, was completely stunned. To her, Kayla looked like an entirely different person, and everything that had just happened was seen clearly by the Demon King upstairs. Meanwhile, inside the Demon King's castle, Seldra and Talm were soaking in a medicinal bath to heal their wounds. Seldra roared in fury, saying that bastard actually dared to splash poison soup all over her. Talm told her to focus on healing first, because unlike Kayla, they did not have that terrifying regeneration. The more Seldra thought about it, the angrier she became. Why was Kayla the only one with that kind of regeneration? Talm said in a low voice that it seemed something really had changed in their younger brother. When Kayla flipped the dining table that morning, Talm had noticed one thing. For the first time in his life, he had seen their father smile, even if only slightly. The moment Seldra heard that, her anger burned even hotter. But Talm said this entire situation was far too abnormal. Seldra frowned and asked what he was trying to say. Talm suggested that the two of them should call a temporary truce and deal with Kayla together first. After hearing that, Seldra immediately thought it was a good idea. Soon, the two reached the same conclusion. Before Kayla drew their father's attention again, they would kill him first. Back in the classroom, the teacher summoned a projection and introduced the figure as the former Demon King, Tulk Carlton. The teacher said Lord Tulk had been stronger than anyone in his era, truly unmatched in the entire realm. But in the end, he died because of a conspiracy planned by the Heaven Guild. Since then, those despicable guild members had continued gathering around the kingdom, using the largest faction, the Heaven Guild, as their core force while preparing to invade. So, in order to help the current Demon King wipe out the enemy, the teacher demanded that every student devote themselves fully to combat training. The students below immediately shouted in unison, "For the glory of demons." After class, Kayla sat high on the castle walls, thinking that he had to find a way out of this place as soon as possible. If he kept staying in this castle, who knew when these monsters would finally toy with him until he died? With that in mind, Kayla asked Linlin behind him whether his father was going out in 3 days. After receiving her answer, Kayla said that this castle actually had one major weakness. Right now, they had no true map architect who could help them use the battlefield terrain, while those guild bastards were taking advantage of the neglected territory around them to launch attacks. So before his father's next expedition, Kayla planned to use this time to draw a complete map of the entire surrounding region. With that map, his father would be able to wipe out every last enemy without leaving a single one behind. And Kayla's first small goal was simple: get out of this castle. But when Kayla finished the map and presented it to his father suddenly drove one hand straight through Kayla's body and coldly asked what exactly Kayla was trying to show him. Kayla endured the pain and said that the terrain surrounding the castle was extremely unfavorable for their current battles. If they could reshape the terrain according to his plan, the entire situation could be turned around. After hearing that, his father finally focused on the map in Kyla's hand. Only after a moment did he release Kyla and ask why he had secretly built an office. Kayla answered that if he had shamelessly claimed from the start that he wanted to help, his father would never have allowed it. That was why he wanted to finish the result first and present it personally. As the son of the great Demon King, he wanted to assist his father in wiping out the guilds. After saying all of this, Kayla quietly stared into his father's cold eyes and waited for his response. Linlin, standing nearby, was trembling all over, wondering how Kayla dared to speak to the Demon King like that. After a moment of silence, his father asked how much time he needed. Kayla froze for a second, almost thinking he had misheard. His father asked again how many days Kayla needed to draw the revised terrain map. Kayla quickly raised his hand and held up 5 fingers. His father said coldly that the Heaven Guild would regroup in 3 days, and by then, this map would be useless. Kayla coughed once and immediately exclaims that he did not mean 5 days. He could finish it in 5 hours. When his father heard that, he suddenly turned his head and looked at Kayla with disbelief. Kayla raised the map and said that within 3 days, before the battle against the Heaven Guild, construction could be completed. So he asked to be allowed to command the plan. Before leaving, his father agreed to Kayla's request, and the corner of his mouth even lifted into another faint smile. But he also warned Kayla that if this failed, he would tear both Kayla and his map to pieces. After his father left, Kayla finally let out a breath of relief. But the next second, he suddenly felt his blood churning violently inside him. Then he coughed up a mouthful of blood. Linlin stared at Kayla, unable to process the fact that he had actually convinced the Demon King. Kayla forced his head up and told her to stop staring and get him to the infirmary. After a simple bandage job, Kayla immediately returned to the workshop to keep drawing, and just as he had promised, he completed the entire terrain map in only 5 hours. The Demon King's army immediately began large-scale construction, according to Kayla's blueprint. The mages also placed illusion magic circles at designated points around the construction zone. That way, enemies outside would not be able to detect what was happening inside the territory. And at that moment, Kayla felt as if he had rediscovered the feeling of creating maps back when he was still a player. Over at the Heaven Guild's gathering point, when the guildmaster, Hermeson, heard that the Demon King's army was reshaping the surrounding terrain, surprise flashed across his face. One of his men reported that the Demon King's army had mobilized a large number of mages and was using illusions to deceive their surveillance. The subordinate then asked whether they should launch an attack immediately to stop the construction. Hermeson said there was no need. Those fools had only started moving now, and it was already too late. In 3 days, Taluya would arrive with the strongest unit, the Tarkin squad. Taluya had spent decades building and training that elite squad, and now it was finally complete. Hermeson believed the Demon King's army could never use 3 days of preparation to defeat a squad forged over several decades. The great Demon King Hell was destined to fall. At the same time, an army was advancing toward the Demon King's castle. The man riding on the wyvern shouted to defeat the Demon King. When the warriors on the ground heard him, they quickened their pace even more. A red-haired woman sighed in admiration, saying General Killman's leadership was truly incredible. At that moment, a small soldier stepped forward, called her Commander Slyers, and asked if they would definitely defeat the Demon King this time. Slyers laughed and said of course they would. Their Tarkan squad was nothing like those ordinary guilds. Meanwhile, inside the castle, the Demon King sat on his throne, thinking that Kayla's map proposal had not been an empty bluff. He could tell the map was not perfect, but his body was already close to reaching its limit, so he no longer had the luxury of hesitation. Tomorrow's battle would settle everything with the Heaven Guild. Outside the castle, mages were constantly using magic to transport materials and construct buildings. The trolls on the ground were also carving stone non-stop, turning it into usable construction material. Everything was progressing smoothly, according to Kayla's plan. That made Kayla realize that building a map in reality was still completely different from doing it in a game, because here, there were far more factors he could control and change, giving him much more freedom than the game ever had. Now, all he had to do was calmly wait for tomorrow's battle to arrive. The next day, when the Tarkan squad reached the front line, the guild members all came out to welcome them enthusiastically. The leaders on both sides quickly linked up. After exchanging intelligence, Hermeson excitedly declared that they should attack the Demon King's castle immediately. Killman strongly agreed with that proposal, but just as both sides were cheering, a small black dot suddenly appeared in the center of the field. Sensing that something was wrong, Killman immediately flashed backward. The next second, the black dot exploded with a thunderous boom. Fortunately, Killman's shield soldiers reacted fast enough to block the impact for him. On Hermeson's side, his subordinates also stepped in just in time to protect him from the blast. When the dust from the explosion finally cleared, a black silhouette slowly stood up. Everyone focused their eyes on it and realized that the figure standing before them was none other than Demon King Hell. In truth, before this happened, Kayla had told his father that he had already removed the Heaven Guild's surveillance magic circles. That meant his father could use teleportation magic without being detected by the enemy in advance. When Kayla suggested that his father teleport directly into the Heaven Guild's base, his father clearly showed interest. But Seldra, standing nearby, immediately tried to stop him, saying that it was far too dangerous. Talm quickly agreed and said Seldra was right. Hearing that, their father looked at them with ice-cold eyes and asked if they were questioning the power of the Demon King. That sentence scared them so badly that cold sweat poured down their bodies. Talm could only stammer a reminder that their father had not fully recovered yet, but their father snapped at them to shut up and decided that he would teleport into the Heaven Guild's base himself, tearing the enemy apart from the inside out. Back on the battlefield, Demon King Hell revealed himself and said coldly to everyone around him that he would make them regret coming here. His overwhelming pressure spread in every direction, forcing everyone to take several steps back without realizing it. Kilman was the first to react and immediately ordered his troops to attack. On Kayla's side, the army had also finished assembling, and at his command, the demons opened the castle gates and charged toward the battlefield. The guild members quickly sent their own forces forward to meet them. Very soon, the two sides clashed head-on. But since Kayla's side had launched a surprise attack, the enemy was caught completely off guard. Seeing that the plan had not gone wrong, the corner of Kayla's mouth lifted slightly. But just then, Seldra and Tom climbed to the top of the castle and appeared behind Kayla. The moment Kayla saw them, he knew something was wrong. Tom giggled and swung the long whip in his hand straight at Kayla. Kayla had no time to dodge, and the whip pierced directly into his lower abdomen. Worse, the whip kept drilling deeper into him, as if trying to stab him to death from the inside. Seeing Kayla restrained, Seldra immediately grabbed her greatsword and rushed toward him. The next second, her blade came down and sliced Kayla's head clean off. The two of them believed that no matter how powerful Kayla's regeneration was, he was definitely dead this time. As Kayla's head flew through the air, his eyes widened in disbelief. When they saw his body fall from the castle and stop moving, the two prepared to go claim credit from the Demon King. Just then, Seldra suddenly drew her dagger and stabbed toward Tom's neck. Fortunately, Talm reacted fast enough and dodged away from the vital strike. Seldra giggled at the sight, then quickly jumped back to create a safe distance. Talm stared at the dagger in her hand and said in shock that it was their mother's weapon, something they were clearly forbidden to use. Seldra said they were demons, so who cared about some trash rule? If she took Talm out here too, then she would become the only heir. Hearing that, Talm gritted his teeth so hard they nearly cracked. The next second, he kicked off the ground and charged straight at Seldra. Seldra charged right back at him without backing down, saying that the moment Talm was stabbed by that dagger, his fate was already sealed. The next second, the two of them crashed into each other and started fighting viciously. Meanwhile, Kayla lay on the ground, watching the two tear into each other before slowly closing his eyes. Suddenly, Linlin used her magic to melt the ground beneath him. Then Linlin dragged Kayla aside and pressed his head back onto his body. After finishing all that, Linlin was panting hard, her entire body trembling uncontrollably. On the battlefield, the demons had already followed their orders and circled around to the rear of the guild forces. But the moment they charged out, they realized guild members had already been waiting there. As soon as the demons appeared, the guild members immediately raised their weapons and launched a counterattack. The demons did not care at all and charged straight into the attack. While the two sides clashed fiercely, the battle at the center of the guild forces also erupted. At General Kilman's command, his dragon began gathering a blazing fireball in its mouth. Then it fired the scorching blast straight at the Demon King. Seeing this, the Demon King only murmured that it had been a long time since he last saw a dragon breath attack. The next second, he dodged the dragon breath with a quick movement, then grabbed the dragon's head with both arms. Then, with a sudden burst of strength, he ripped the dragon's head clean off. Seeing the Demon King's terrifying figure, Kilman was so frightened that he could not even speak. The other ranged mages snapped back to their senses and immediately launched their attacks. In an instant, the Demon King was swallowed by beams of light and magic spheres. Looking at the rising smoke, Kilman could not help asking if they had succeeded. But when the smoke cleared, everyone realized the Demon King's appearance had completely changed. Kilman's heart sank. Just as the books described, the Demon King had transformed. Slayers cried out that this was the Demon King's final form. The ordinary members around them trembled in fear the moment they saw him. Slayers immediately turned back and shouted for everyone to stay sharp and not let fear consume them. But even Kilman, the general himself, could not stop his body from shaking under the Demon King's pressure. And the Demon King, standing at the center of them all, showed no fear at all. He knew perfectly well that Kyla's plan had one major flaw. there was no way out. The plan could indeed use the magic circles to gather their forces directly in the center of the Heaven Guild's base. But if they lost, there would be no path of retreat. However, as the Demon King, he had never mentioned that weakness. Because the Demon King never worried about having no way out, he even suspected that Kayla had already considered this point as well. With that thought, the pressure around the Demon King surged even higher. Seeing this, Killman immediately ordered everyone to prepare for battle. Meanwhile, beneath the castle, after Linlin placed Kyla's head back onto his body, her entire body was still trembling uncontrollably, and she kept whispering desperate prayers under her breath. She remembered the experiment Kayla had done with her one day earlier. At that time, Kyla discovered that even if one of his limbs was severed, he could quickly attach it back to his body. After testing his arms and legs, the next part to test was his head. Kayla pointed at his own neck and said, "This part might hurt a little." So when Linlin cut it off, she had better do it fast. After the experiment was over, Kayla told Linlin to find Seldra's servant and to pass along his exact words without changing a single thing. After that, Linlin privately met with Seldra's servant. She told the servant that Kayla planned to use the chaos of the battle to kill Seldra himself. The maid became furious the moment she heard this and said she had to tell Seldra immediately. Seeing that the bait had worked, Linlin added that Seldra could turn Kyla's plan against him and cut off his head instead. No matter how fast Kayla regenerated, he would still die without a head. And so, Linlin followed Kayla's insane plan. But now that Kayla's head had been separated from his body for so long, she had no idea whether it would still work. Just as Linlin was panicking and completely at a loss, Kayla slowly opened his eyes. As he sat up, he said it seemed the dagger infused with magic had slowed his regeneration down by a lot. But since he had survived, none of that mattered anymore. Everything was still moving according to his plan. The first thing Kayla did after getting up was terminate the master-servant contract between himself and Linlin. Seeing what he had done, Linlin was completely stunned. Kayla looked back and told her that from now on, she was free. But to his surprise, Linlin did not leave. Instead, she ran over and hugged him. She cried and said that from now on, she belonged to Kayla, and she wanted him to take her with him. Seeing her sob like that, Kayla pushed her away and walked toward the exit. As long as he stepped into the light ahead, he would escape the Demon Castle's surveillance. But just as Kayla was only one step away from freedom, Linlin suddenly rushed in front of him. The next second, 3 bolts of lightning flashed out from the white light. Linlin immediately raised her hand and released a shield to block them. Right after that, 3 masked figures leaned in from the exit. Kayla looked closer and realized they were guild members who had come to wipe out the Demon King's castle. It turned out they had known about this secret passage all along and had set an ambush here in advance. The moment those 3 saw Kayla, they attacked without the slightest hesitation. Linlin stepped forward again to block the attack for him and told him to run. Kayla anxiously asked what she was going to do. Linlin said she was his maid, and her first duty was to protect his safety. But Kayla knew very well that Linlin only knew a few simple defensive spells and almost no offensive magic at all. Seeing Kayla still standing there, Linlin shouted for him to run. But Kayla only placed his hand gently on her shoulder. Then he forcefully threw her behind him, without Linlin's shield blocking them. The lightning bolts instantly struck Kayla. The guild members recognized him as Kayla, the son of the Demon King. They had all heard that Kayla was the most useless and cowardly of the Demon King's children, so ultimate magic would be more than enough. But as someone who had crossed into this world, Kayla knew the original owner had always been too timid. He had never truly used his own power, nor had he ever shown his real strength in front of others. So these people had no idea how strong Kayla really was. With that thought, Kayla simply raised his hand and shattered the magic attack with a single slap. Linlin watched this scene, and her understanding of Kayla was shattered all over again. Even through the mask, Kayla could feel the shock on that guild member's face. But Kayla gave him no time to react. He stepped forward in a flash and slammed him to the ground. The guild member on the ground tried to cast a higher level spell, but the next second, Kayla tightened his grip just slightly and crushed his head. Linlin stared as Kayla killed a heaven rank mage in one hit and cried out that it was impossible. After killing that man, Kayla slowly stood up and turned his gaze toward the remaining 2. The 2 immediately stepped back, raising their guard to the limit. Then, without hesitation, they launched a high-level magic attack at Kayla. The spell was called Light Spear Curse. Its power was enormous, but the drain on the caster was terrifying as well. So they placed all their hopes on this one strike. Linlin recognized the spell and shouted for Kayla to retreat. But before she could finish speaking, 2 light spears had already pierced through Kayla's body, and another light spear pierced straight through Linlin's shoulder. Only then did Kayla realize that his body could no longer move. Linlin turned back trembling and apologized, saying she had failed to protect him. When the guild members saw that the spell had landed, they finally let out a breath of relief. They did not dare waste any more time. One of them drew his sword and prepared to step forward to finish Kyla and Linlin off. But the man behind him stopped him, saying it would be a waste to kill them just like that. Then he walked over to Linlin with a twisted grin and lifted her chin with his hand. Linlin immediately understood what he was trying to do and cursed him out on the spot. Hearing that, the man also drew his sword and pressed it against Linlin's neck, saying he would teach her a lesson soon enough. But before that, they planned to kill Kyla first. Yet, the instant that man raised his sword to cut off Kayla's head, Kayla suddenly felt a faint ripple of magic in the air around him. Immediately after, his father, Demon King Hell, appeared in front of him. Seeing his father here, Kayla urgently asked whether the battle on his side had already ended. But his father told Kayla to listen carefully. Among his children, Seldra would do anything to inherit the Demon King's throne, with no regard for the lives of other demons of her own kind. Tom, on the other hand, had no ambition to become the Demon King. Kayla cut him off directly, saying he did not care about them at all. He only wanted to know how his father had come here. His father told Kyla that every generation of Demon King possessed one ability. Before death, they could pass all the magic power they had accumulated in their lifetime to their own bloodline. Hearing that, Kayla's eyes widened instantly. His father continued, saying that although he had only watched Kayla for a very short time, he could already tell that Kayla was the best candidate to become the next Demon King. As he spoke, a black magic orb began condensing in his palm. Then, he pressed that orb against Kayla's chest. After doing this, his father's phantom slowly began to fade. Meanwhile, at the center of the guild-based battlefield, Demon King Hell's severed head had fallen to the ground, with the corpse of the great general lying nearby. The guild had paid an enormous price before finally killing the Demon King. None of them could believe his strength had been that terrifying. He had teleported in alone and fought to the bitter end by himself. Back with Kyla, the moment he received the Demon King's inheritance, he shattered the light spears inside his body. Even the light spear piercing Linlin disappeared along with them. The two guild members could not understand why Kayla's magic power had suddenly surged. Feeling the new power inside him, Kayla's lips curled into a wicked smile. Now that Demon King Hell was dead, Kayla had inherited his power. At this point, Kayla's plan had succeeded. After that rush of ecstasy, Kayla only raised his hand slightly, and magic several times stronger than before erupted around him. The two men realized something was wrong and immediately turned to run. But Kayla had no intention of giving them that chance. He clenched his fist and flashed forward. With one punch, both men were blasted dozens of meters away. By the time they crashed into the wall, they had already lost consciousness. Kayla now possessed Hell's overwhelming power, but with his current body, he probably could not withstand it for very long. Still, the important thing was that he could finally escape the Demon King's castle. He had finally reached freedom. But before Kayla could take more than a few steps, blue light suddenly wrapped around his body. Linlin recognized it at once as teleportation magic. Realizing that his body was beginning to disappear, Kayla urgently reached out to Linlin. Linlin ignored everything else and immediately stepped into the teleportation circle with him. As the circle flashed with blue light, the two looked around and realized they had arrived in a completely unfamiliar place. Linlin asked in shock if Kayla could actually use teleportation magic, and she also realized that all her injuries had healed. Kayla said the magic circle just now had not been summoned by him. It seemed more like a spell the Demon King had placed on his children in advance. They might have spent 3 days inside the teleportation space, and the Demon King had likely done this so his children could escape safely if the castle fell. After hearing Kayla's explanation, Linlin also realized that Demon King Hell had most likely fallen. So she solemnly declared that she would support Kyla in becoming the next Demon King. Kayla felt that Linlin had clearly misunderstood something, because he had no desire to become the Demon King at all. But considering how short-handed he was right now, he chose not to tell her the truth for the time being. After walking for a while, the two soon saw a massive castle in the distance. The moment Linlin saw it, she stopped in her tracks, her eyes widening in shock, because she recognized it at once. That was the magical kingdom of Arsal, a nation that trained its talents for one purpose only: defeating demons. And right now, the city was holding a celebration over the defeat of the Demon King. To avoid exposing their demon identities, Linlin immediately used transformation magic. Kyla also disguised his appearance. After entering the city, Kayla asked Linlin to tell him everything she knew about this place. Linlin explained that Arsal was a small island nation on the eastern border of Teruya. It was protected by Shuihuo, a giant mysterious creature living in the nearby sea. Because of that protection, magic had developed naturally and rapidly there, allowing Arsol to raise many powerful mages. And for a very long time, they had treated demons as their greatest enemy. After hearing her explanation, Kyla could not understand why his father's teleportation circle had sent him to such a dangerous place. Behind him, Linlin suggested that they should leave immediately. Kayla said that even if they wanted to run, they still needed to prepare first, because he knew very well that if he wanted to achieve his dream in this world, magic would be absolutely essential. In this country, almost everything seemed to be done through magic. Even some of the buildings around them were floating in midair with the help of magic. If Kayla could learn magic here, he would be able to build structures far greater and larger than anything he had made in the game. Just as he thought of that, he suddenly heard a growling sound behind him. It was Linlin's stomach. So Kayla took her to a street stall and bought some of the local famous magic dishes. But once Linlin started eating, there was no stopping her. As long as it looked edible, she wanted to try it. In the end, the two walked into a tavern. To celebrate the Demon King's defeat, a red-haired woman paid for everyone in the entire place. Seeing that there was free booze, Kayla and Linlin naturally joined in. But after only a few cups, Kyla already felt his head spinning. When the red-haired woman saw them, she suddenly paused. Then a sly smile appeared on her face. Kayla had barely drunk anything before he rushed outside and threw up violently. Seeing this, Linlin could not help pointing out that these people were celebrating his father's death. Yet he still managed to drink like it was a party. Kyla was just about to argue back when he suddenly saw a group of people rushing past behind them, shouting that a new S-rank mission had appeared. Linlin's heart shook when she heard that. The previous mission to wipe out the Demon King had already been S-rank, and now another S-rank mission had appeared. Unable to hold back her curiosity, she grabbed Kayla and followed the crowd to take a look. When they arrived, Kayla saw his own portrait hanging high on the city wall. It turned out that the new mission was to hunt down the son of the Demon King. Seeing this, Kyla shouted in anger, asking why they were still coming after him when the Demon King was already dead. Linlin immediately covered his mouth and explained to the people around them that he was just drunk. The crowd did not pay much attention, and instead began discussing how Kayla was supposed to be the weakest of the Demon King's children. To them, this mission looked like it should be B rank at most. After watching for a while, Kayla took Linlin and left the plaza, reminding her to keep a low profile from now on, and told her to drop the young master title and call him Jiru instead. Linlin muttered that the name sounded really strange. Just as they were planning to pack up and leave the city, a red-haired woman by the road suddenly called out to them. She asked what the new S-rank mission was about. Linlin quickly said they had only glanced at it and did not really know. Kayla recognized her as the woman who had paid for everyone in the tavern earlier. Since everyone called her the Hope of Arsol, she was clearly no ordinary person. But before Kayla could finish that thought, she suddenly hugged both him and Linlin. She said with a smile that she had noticed the two of them back in the tavern, and that they smelled strange. The moment Kayla heard that, cold sweat broke out all over him. Linlin also went pale with fear. If their demon identities were exposed here, they would be surrounded and killed by countless mages. But unexpectedly, the red-haired woman only said they must be travelers who had not bathed in a while, which explained the sour smell on them. She suggested they come to her place for a bath and a drink. Hearing that, Kyla and Linlin finally let out a breath of relief. Then the two immediately awkwardly laughed along. That night, Kyla soaked in a bathtub while looking at the snacks placed in front of him. He had not expected even the food here to be made with magic. This place truly deserved to be called a magical kingdom. Was this not the game-like world he had always dreamed of? Meanwhile, in another room, Linlin was in absolute misery. Because she was sharing a bath with Slyers, she had to desperately maintain her disguise and make sure her identity was not exposed. Slyers noticed how nervous she looked and asked why she seemed so scared. Anyone who did not know better might think Linlin was a wanted demon. Linlin immediately laughed dryly and said that was impossible. As soon as she finished speaking, Slyers raised her hand and gathered a faint cloud of vapor in her palm. She smiled and said she could use the fragrance to help Linlin relax. Linlin recognized it at a glance. That was no ordinary scent. It was the aura of the holy element. For demons, it was practically the worst smell possible because it could drain away their magic power. And once their magic weakened, their disguise spell would collapse too. Inside, Linlin was screaming for Kayla to hurry up and save her. But at that very moment, Kayla was leisurely enjoying a cup of delicious coffee somewhere else. With no other choice, Linlin could only cover her mouth and nose tightly, refusing to breathe in the scent. Beside her, Slyers began talking about how she had fought her way through the war against the Demon King. And as she spoke, she kept moving closer to Linlin. Unable to hold her breath any longer, Linlin quickly stood up and said Slyers could continue the story later. Then, using the bathroom as an excuse, Linlin jumped out of the bathtub and rushed out in panic. Watching Linlin flee, Slyers smiled faintly and murmured that it seemed Linlin did not like holy energy. When Kayla came out, he happened to run into Linlin in the hallway. The moment Linlin saw him, she rushed over and said her disguise had almost been broken just now. She then told Kayla what had happened and suggested that they leave this dangerous place immediately. After hearing her out, Kayla thought for a moment, then turned around, deciding to take one last bath before leaving. But just then, Slyers appeared behind them and asked if they were already planning to leave. Linlin turned around and stammered out a random excuse, trying to get away as quickly as possible. Slyers asked if they really did not want to try the magic drinks and dishes here, saying they were 10,000 times better than those snacks. The moment Kayla heard that, his expression immediately turned cautious. Then, he decisively nodded and said he would love to try them. Meanwhile, outside the house where they were staying, a group of mages had quietly arrived. One of them whispered, asking if there really was a demon here. The leader replied that this was not just any demon, it was the son of the Demon King. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance, and they had to capture him. In the living room, Slyers poured Kayla and Linlin a drink each, saying it was made with holy water and tasted great. But as demons, Kayla and Linlin could only stare at the holy water in their hands while trembling inside. Slyers said that in order to kill the Demon King, she had joined the human elite unit known as the Tarkin Squad. After joining the squad, she trained desperately, every single day. As she spoke, she lifted her clothes slightly and showed them the scars left from that training. Looking at the scar that was nearly 3 inches wide, both Kayla and Linlin froze. Then, Slyers gently wiped her hand across her face, revealing another scar there. She said that, in truth, she only had one eye left. This stunned Kayla, and he could not understand what this woman was trying to do. Slyers explained that most of the time, she used magic to maintain her appearance. Whenever she saw those scars, she would remember the pain of that day. To defeat the Demon King, they had been forced to undergo the harshest training since childhood. So, in order to fight the Demon King, she had practically sacrificed her entire life. As she said this, Slyers suddenly stood up, walked over to Kayla, and asked what the two of them had been doing all that time. The next second, she lifted Kayla's shirt. As her hand slowly moved upward, she asked why there was not a single scar on his body, and why his skin was as smooth as a baby's. Kayla could feel that as her hand touched him, his disguise was slowly being unraveled. Then, Slyers leaned close to his ear and whispered, "You're a demon, aren't you?" Hearing that, Kayla instantly broke out in cold sweat. Just then, a swarm of rats suddenly crawled out of the chimney. The next second, after a flash of light, all those tiny rats transformed into mages. Seeing this, Kayla and Linlin immediately sensed that something was wrong. It looked like they had truly fallen into this woman's trap today. Before they could react, the mages stepped forward and surrounded them completely. But to Kayla's surprise, the leader shouted at Slyers, saying they had finally found her, the demon who had infiltrated the city. Slyers did not panic at all. She simply stood up and placed herself in front of Kayla and Linlin. Only then did Kayla understand that these mages had not come for them. And judging from the situation, Slyers was actually a demon too. Since her identity had already been exposed, Slyers stopped pretending. She released the magic power around her, summoned her staff, and stepped forward. The mages no longer hesitated and launched their attacks at Slyers. But against attacks of that level, she did not even bother lifting her eyelids. As an elite mage of the Tarkin Squad, Slyers did not take these Arsenal mages seriously at all. With a casual wave of her hand, she fired a black magic orb, blasting the entire room apart. The shockwave was so powerful that even Kayla, who had inherited the Demon King's power, was forced to take several steps back. Even after the explosion ended, thick demonic energy still lingered in the air. Linlin protected Kayla while saying in shock she couldn't believe someone possessed such powerful magic. After Kayla recovered from the shock, he immediately asked Slyers why she had protected them. Slyers slowly turned back and said she was Demon King Hell's daughter, which also made her Kayla's biological older sister. After that, Slyers brought them to the Earth Demon tribe. The moment the Earth Demons saw that Kayla was the Demon King's heir, they became extremely respectful and obeyed him without question. After entering their underground city, Kayla looked around and realized this place was completely different from the Demon King's castle. None of the buildings here used magic. Instead, they were built mainly from natural materials. And more importantly, Kayla could hardly believe the city's location. Beneath this desert, there was actually such a massive underground city. With that in mind, Kayla thanked Slyers for bringing him here, because the talents of these earth demons were exactly what they needed in the early stage. While eating, Slyers said there was also an excellent warrior here who could be recruited. That immediately caught Kayla's interest, and he asked what kind of demon this warrior was. Slayers said that when the human elite unit, the Tarkin squad, had been on its way to the Demon King's castle, they discovered this city. At that time, the moment Kilman saw these demons, he ordered them all to be slaughtered. The Earth demons here were no match for the Tarkin squad, and the city's defenses were quickly broken. Back then, Slayers had been serving as an undercover commander inside the Tarkin squad, and that was when she saw a powerful Earth demon step forward to protect a group of children. Kilman looked at him with clear curiosity. Then he asked the Earth demon for his name. The Earth demon answered that his name was Douglas. After hearing that, Kilman quietly repeated the name under his breath. Facing the aggressive Kilman, Douglas was already prepared to fight to the death. But to his surprise, Kilman ordered a retreat and continued advancing toward the Demon King's castle. As Douglas stood there, looking completely confused, Slayers explained to him that his courage had saved his tribe. After hearing Slayers' story, Kayla began to take an interest in Douglas. An Earth demon who could actually fight had already far exceeded Kaila's expectations. So Kayla called over the Earth demon chief and said he wanted to meet Douglas. When the chief heard that name, he advised Kayla to choose someone else and explained that Douglas was extremely stubborn. Kayla told him not to worry about that and simply lead the way. Before long, they arrived at a blacksmith shop. But when Kayla explained that he wanted Douglas to leave with him, Douglas rejected him outright. Douglas said that even if Kayla was the son of the great Demon King, he wasn't obligated to follow him. Kayla then asked what would happen if he used force to take Douglas away. Douglas turned back to look at him and said he would rather die fighting. Kayla asked why he was so determined to remain here. Douglas said he had been born here and raised here, so he had a duty to protect this land. After saying that, he even apologized to Kayla. Looking at Douglas's stubborn determination, Kayla was reminded of how desperate he used to be in the game, trying desperately to pull an orc ally just like him. In the end, Kayla could only sigh helplessly and turn to leave. But the moment Kayla came out, he saw Slayers and Linlin completely drunk. Seeing this, Kayla was instantly furious. He had been working so hard to recruit talent, and these two were out here having fun. So without the slightest hesitation, he chose to join them. Before long, all three of them were completely wasted. The chief was afraid something would happen if they kept drinking, so he quickly ordered people to take them away to rest. But while Kayla was asleep, the closed door to his room was suddenly pushed open. Then, several earth demons carrying axes walked in, one after another. When they reached Kayla's bed, Douglas raised his axe high over Kayla's head and cursed him as a coward. The moment he finished speaking, Douglas swung the axe straight down at Kayla's head. But 1 second before the blade landed, Kayla suddenly opened his eyes and tilted his head slightly, dodging the strike. Seeing this, Douglas was instantly shocked. Kayla used that opening to flash out of bed and land on the floor. Realizing their ambush had been exposed, the Earth Demons all rushed at Kayla together. But Kayla was not surprised to see them at all, because during the day, when he went to the blacksmith shop to find Douglas, he had already noticed something strange. First, the restraint device Douglas had been forging did not look like something meant for orcs at all. And when Kayla later walked around to observe the tribe's buildings, he also noticed someone secretly trailing him. From that moment on, Kayla began observing the details of the surrounding environment much more carefully. Soon, he detected an extremely faint magic barrier on one of the walls. If he had not inherited the Demon King's magic power and gained extraordinary perception, Kayla never would have noticed such a weak magical fluctuation. What caught his attention even more was that Slayers had once said that among the people Douglas protected back then, there had been dark elves. But after wandering through the tribe for so long, Kayla had not seen a single dark elf. Before Kayla could think any further, the Earth Demons had already charged right up to him. Kayla simply circulated his magic power, flashed forward, and knocked them all to the ground unconscious. In the end, only Douglas was left sitting on the ground, staring at Kayla in terror. Kayla slowly stood up and said to Douglas that back then, the truth he hid from Kilman wasn't that he couldn't let the young dark elves die, but that he simply refused to hand them over. In simple terms, Douglas had not been protecting them. He just did not want them taken away from his side. So now, was it time to remove that magic barrier? Soon, Kayla brought Douglas to the plaza. The moment the Earth Demons saw them, they all grabbed their weapons and surrounded Kayla. From their reaction, Kayla could easily guess that the entire tribe was probably involved in this. When the chief rushed over and saw Douglas, he asked in horror if Douglas had truly failed. Douglas could only turn back and stammer an apology. Seeing that some of the Earth Demons were eager to rush forward, Kayla immediately raised the light blade in his hand and warned them not to move, or he would kill Douglas on the spot. The Earth Demons could not believe Kayla had defeated so many of them and captured Douglas alive. After all, They had heard that Kayla was the weakest and most cowardly son of the Demon King. After leaving the plaza, Kayla brought Douglas to the place where he had discovered the magic barrier earlier. Under Kayla's threat, Douglas reluctantly took out a purple stone and placed it on the barrier. The moment the purple stone touched the magic circle, the wall in front of them vanished with a sharp flash, revealing a pitch-black cave behind it. And inside that cave, countless dark elves were being held captive. Even though Kayla had already prepared himself mentally, the sight still shook him hard because their condition was far worse than he had imagined. After Slyers and Linlin learned that Kayla had been ambushed, they rushed over as well. The moment they reached Kyla's side, they froze in shock at the scene inside the cave. Without turning around, Kayla asked Slyers if she could use memory transfer magic to let him see the memories of these dark elves. Slyers stepped forward and said that while it would not be as queer as transferring her own memories, she could try. Then she raised her hand and activated memory transfer magic. The memories of one dark elf began flooding violently into Kayla's mind. Through those memories, Kayla learned that this place was basically hell for the dark elves. After this dark elf child's mother had been forced to bear children, the child was born in this very place. Human nobles would come here from time to time to make their selections. Once a child was chosen, they would be forcibly taken away. In exchange, the nobles would leave a huge sum of money for the chief, and the other earth demons were all involved as well. The dark elves had only learned these things from the occasional newcomers who were dragged into the cave. And those newcomers had also told the children that outside there were clear skies and blue seas. There was delicious food, and there were carefree journeys. For children who had been locked in this cave since birth, those things filled them with curiosity and longing. So, their greatest wish was for their own children to leave this cave one day and freely experience the outside world. After seeing those memories, Kayla gritted his teeth so hard, they nearly cracked. The next second, he clenched his fist and spun around. Then he punched Douglas straight in the face. Douglas took the blow head-on and was sent flying 7 or 8 meters before slamming into the wall behind him. Slyers also questioned them in fury, saying they had never been trying to protect these dark elves at all. They had been selling them to human nobles. Douglas, lying on the ground, knew there was no point hiding the truth anymore. So he said that dark elves were a rare race and human nobles had always coveted them. Dark elves were blessed by nature, and if they lived in the designated place, they could help the earth demons live in peace. In Douglas's eyes, was that not the perfect reason to raise them like livestock? Linlin cursed him, asking how he could enslave another demon race like this. Douglas stood up and shouted that the Demon King was dead now, and if they wanted to survive under the humans, this was the only way. At that moment, Kayla thought back to how he had suffered under his father's oppression before crossing into this world. But the pain these children had endured was far deeper than his own. So Kayla no longer hesitated and called Slyers and Linlin over. He coldly told them that now they would finish the reckoning Kilman had failed to complete back then. The two were already furious, and they immediately agreed. Following Douglas's furious roar, the earth demons outside the cave began charging in to surround them. Linlin immediately stepped forward to block them. Behind her, Slyers summoned her staff, unleashing magic, while coldly asking how they dared attack the Demon King's heir. The earth demons said Kayla was nothing but a coward, and they had no reason to obey him. After knocking back several earth demons, Linlin said coldly that they couldn't be more wrong. Inside the cave, Douglas also launched another attack at Kayla. But Kayla, who had inherited the Demon King's power, was nothing like before. With one kick, he sent Douglas flying again. The Dark Elves could also tell that Kayla seemed to be trying to save them from this place. So one of the Dark Elves stood up, wanting to step forward and help. Seeing this, another Dark Elf hurried forward to stop her and shouted, "Wood, what are you trying to do?" But the Dark Elf named Wood said that if they did nothing now, they would only continue to suffer in the future. She did not want to live like this anymore. Thinking back on everything she had endured, Wood collapsed to her knees and began sobbing uncontrollably. Her cries also caught Kayla's attention. So Kayla turned to Douglas and asked if he could hear their cries of pain. He would make Douglas pay back every single bit of it. But what Kayla did not expect was for Douglas to suddenly take a small red stone from his pocket. Then, without hesitation, he tossed it into his mouth and swallowed it. When the other earth demons saw this, they also pulled out identical stones and swallowed them. Linlin cried out in shock. It was earth ore. She had thought that thing was only a legend, but it actually existed. Hearing that, Kayla quickly turned back and asked Linlin what it was. Slyers shouted before Linlin could answer, warning Kayla to be careful. She said that once this ore was consumed, it could increase the body's physical functions tenfold for a short time. But the side effect was that it consumed part of the user's lifespan. While Slyers was explaining, the muscles on Douglas's body began swelling rapidly. Then he let out a roar. Kayla was instantly shocked, because their physical strength was not the only thing being enhanced. Their magic power was also rising at an alarming speed. But Kayla still had not fully mastered the Demon King's power. In the split second he was stunned, Douglas's fist had already reached his face. At such a close distance, Kayla had no time to dodge. But just then, several vines suddenly burst out of the ground. In an instant, they wrapped around Douglas's entire body. No matter how hard Douglas struggled, he could not move those vines even slightly. Kayla turned his head and realized that the one who had acted was a dark elf. The other dark elves were shocked and shouted, "Wood, you have really done it now." Douglas also turned and cursed Wood viciously. Kayla seized the opportunity and dashed forward. Then, he drove his magic-coated arm straight into Douglas's abdomen. At the same time, Kayla turned to the dark elf and asked if her name was Wood. He said he was actually starting to like her. Wood froze and stared blankly at Kayla. Douglas spat out a mouthful of blood beside them and cursed Wood as a traitor. Then he let out a guttural roar and forcibly broke free from the vines binding him. Seeing Douglas's body suddenly swell even larger, Kayla felt a chill run down his back, but his arm was still inside Douglas's body, so he had no time to dodge. With no other choice, Kayla took the punch head on. After crashing into the wall, he felt as if several bones inside his body had snapped. Once his powerful regeneration healed him, Kayla was stunned. He had not expected a single piece of earth ore to be this terrifying. After knocking Kayla away, Douglas immediately turned and charged at Wood. He rushed up to her, grabbed her by the jaw, and lifted her into the air. Then, he roared that he would twist Wood's head off. As Douglas's grip kept tightening, a sickening creak came from Wood's neck. Kayla, lying on the ground, had not expected Douglas to give up attacking him and go after Wood instead. But now, Wood's neck was about to be crushed, and the distance between Kayla and them was too great. Even if he rushed over now, he would never make it in time, unless he could use a ranged attack. Just then, Kayla suddenly found himself inside a pitch-black space. A shadowy figure appeared behind him and said this place was Kayla's consciousness. Hearing that, Kayla quickly turned around and asked who it was. The shadow did not answer. It only asked if he still wanted to save that elf. Although time flowed much slower here than in reality, he still needed to move fast. The moment Kayla heard that, he immediately asked if there was a way to save Wood. The shadow said Kayla was not yet ready to use all the power the Demon King had given him, but as his body and mind became more aligned, he would unlock more and more of that power. Kayla impatiently cut it off and said the explanations could wait. Right now, he only needed to know which part of the power he could use. The shadow said that although Kayla was still weak in his current state, there was indeed one skill he could use. As it spoke, the image of a bow seemed to flash through its hand. Then the shadow said they would meet again soon, and at the very end, it called out the name Kayla had used back on Blue Star, Jang Jiyu. Hearing that the shadow actually knew that name, Kayla's heart skipped a beat. But just as he tried to ask more, his consciousness suddenly left that space and returned to reality. And now, a blue longbow had appeared in Kayla's hand. Without hesitating, he immediately drew the bow and took aim. When Douglas sensed the magic fluctuation coming from Kayla, he turned his head and was instantly shocked, as if he recognized a bow in Kayla's hand. Wood seized the moment when Douglas froze and bit down hard on his hand. Then, she summoned vines again, making them burst out of the ground. At the same time, Kayla finished charging his shot. With a sharp whoosh, the magic arrow shot forward. The instant the arrow touched Douglas, intense blue flames erupted. Even Kayla had not expected this arrow to be so powerful. In less than 3 seconds, Douglas was burned to ashes by the blue flames. Looking at the longbow in his hand, Kayla could not figure out what that shadow inside his consciousness had been. Meanwhile, at the cave entrance, Linlin was still locked in a fierce battle with the earth demons. Because the space was too narrow, Slayers could not use large-scale destructive magic either. Seeing this, Kayla aimed in their direction and drew the bow again. With a rapid series of whooshes, he fired 7 or 8 arrows in a row. Those arrows moved as if they had eyes, striking the earth demons precisely in the head. Slayers was overjoyed when she saw that Kayla could now use ranged attacks. Before long, the earth demons around them were either killed or driven into retreat. Slayers looked at the earth ore in her hand and said this thing was far stronger than she had imagined. Kayla walked up to the Dark Elves and told them they were free now. They should never let those bastards capture them again. For a moment, the Dark Elves could not believe it and asked Kayla to confirm it again. Kayla said, yes, They could leave this place now. They should take their children and find somewhere to live in peace. After hearing that, the Dark Elves all knelt down together and thanked Kyla. Slayer said she had originally wanted to recruit the Earth Demons, but now that was clearly impossible. After hearing that, Kayla walked over to Wood and asked if she had not been born here, but had been captured and brought here instead. Wood nodded and said that was right. Kayla then asked if she had no family left either. Wood lowered her head and quietly said yes. So Kyla told her to come with him from now on, because they needed someone who could guide them. Wood said she was not an Earth Demon, and she was not good with terrain either. She even trembled slightly as she said that she could not help Kayla at all. Kayla told Wood not to worry because she was an elf blessed by nature, and just now, she had already proven that she was braver than anyone when facing danger. To Kayla, that was more than enough. After saying that, he reached his hand out to her. Looking at Kayla's outstretched hand, Wood sank into her memories. In her memories, she could no longer even remember what her parents looked like. After being abandoned, she had been captured by the Earth Demons and brought here. She had once believed she would live in this hell forever, all the way until she died. But now, someone had appeared before her and said he would take her away from this place. With tears streaming down her face, Wood stammered and asked Kayla if she could really go with him. Kayla said she was not following him. She was walking alongside him. And just like that, Kyla's group dealt with the Earth Demons and rescued the captive Dark Elves. Afterward, they continued their journey. Before they had even properly set out, Linlin ran up to Wood and tried to intimidate her, saying Wood was the newcomer. So from now on, she had to listen to Linlin. After saying goodbye to the Dark Elves, Kayla's group moved on, and Slayer suggested they should first find a place with a river. As an elf, Wood immediately stepped forward and pointed in one direction, saying she could smell water over there. Hearing that, Linlin immediately leaned in and acted tough, saying Wood did have some skills after all, which made her a little like Linlin. Kayla asked Slayers why they needed to find a river. Slayers explained that traveling on foot would be too slow, so they needed to find a water source and look for creatures they could ride. From behind them, Linlin immediately suggested that they could catch a dragon. Slayers told her to stop dreaming, saying they would be lucky enough if they found a unicorn. After thinking it over, Kayla decided to follow their suggestion and head toward the water source. Meanwhile, beside a small stream not far from them, 2 unicorns were drinking water. Suddenly, they seemed to sense something and immediately raised their heads, their eyes full of alertness. After seeing what was coming, they did not hesitate for even a second and fled the area. Not long after the unicorns left, a massive creature arrived at the stream. The footprints left behind by that enormous creature were nearly 2 meters long. And it was none other than the legendary creature known as a wyvern. Kayla's group knew nothing about this. They were still on their way to the water source, while Linlin kept going on and on about catching a dragon. Not long after they left, a woman in a white robe arrived at the Earth Demon tribe. When the last surviving Earth Demon saw her, he immediately shouted for help. This woman in white was Kudli, the one who had previously used a tracking spell on the Demon King's severed head. Not long ago, following the tracking spell, they had slaughtered many demon groups, yet they still had not found Kyla's trail. Kudli analyzed that the family tracking spell had likely failed because multiple target individuals existed. Karka said that after the last great battle, it should be impossible for so many of the Demon King's children to have survived. Was there really no way to tell which one was the real Kyla? Audria, who was eating meat nearby, added that they could not possibly hunt down every single target. Killian cut them off and said they had no other choice now. They would simply have to slaughter every demon scattered across the continent. Then, Killian asked Kudli if there was a way to quickly investigate the demon tribes nearby. Kudli replied that if she moved alone, she could teleport over a short distance, which would make things much faster. Dide stood up and said that, in that case, the rest of them only needed to follow behind and clean up the battlefield. After they reached an agreement, Kudli slowly rose to her feet. A blue light flashed as her eyes widened. The next instant, her entire body vanished from where she stood. While investigating the Earth Demon tribe, Kudli detected a faint trace of magic power left behind by Kayla. The surviving Earth Demon on the ground also told Kudli everything Kyla had done there. After hearing that, Kudli asked which direction Kayla had gone in the end. The Earth Demon said he did not know and kept urging Kudli to save him quickly. But the next second, a beam of light shot out and pierced straight through his skull. Then Kudli used her tracking spell again on the remaining trace of Kayla's aura. Meanwhile, Kayla's group had also arrived near the stream. When he saw that there really was a water source here, Kyla praised Wood, saying elves really were impressive if she could smell water from several kilometers away. Linlin immediately ran over and told Wood not to get too full of herself. Because they had traveled for so long without eating, Kyla's stomach had already started growling. Linlin quickly said her fishing skills were amazing, and if Kyla waited a little, he would have grilled fish to eat. But before she could even finish speaking, all the fish in the stream suddenly jumped out of the water. Then, they jumped straight into Wood's arms. Seeing the shocked and confused looks on everyone's faces, Wood explained that she had done it by using the power of nature to control the water current. Seeing Wood suddenly become the center of attention, Linlin felt her sense of crisis growing stronger and stronger. Even when Linlin tried to help by starting a fire, Slayers beat her to it and summoned an even larger flame first. This made Linlin feel as if she had become completely useless. Before long, the fish were grilled, and everyone immediately dug in. After taking a couple of bites, Kayla looked over at Linlin and asked if she was not going to eat. Linlin had just said she had no appetite when Slayers casually took her portion away, but Kayla still noticed that Linlin looked extremely down. So he spoke up and said fish alone was not enough, and wondered if there was any fruit nearby. The moment Linlin heard that, she perked up and said she would go look for some right away. When Wood looked like she wanted to use her ability to help too, Kayla stopped her. By the time he turned back around, Linlin had already run far away. Slayers saw through his little act and leaned in, saying he was surprisingly thoughtful. After Linlin left, Wood said she had seen unicorns when she was little, and she had smelled their scent here earlier. Kayla muttered that it would be great if they could catch a dragon, like Linlin had said. Slayers frowned and said there were no true dragons here at all. After Linlin ran into the forest, she soon spotted an apple tree. Eager to prove herself, she did not pay attention to what she was stepping on, and used it as a stepping stone to leap toward the tree. But just as she reached out to pick an apple, the thing beneath her feet slowly began to move. Linlin looked down and saw an eye as large as a lantern staring right back up at her. Then she followed that eye and looked over the rest of the enormous creature. Only then did she realize in horror that she was standing on the head of a wyvern. Meanwhile, Kayla's group was still sitting beside the campfire, discussing the power inside Wood. Wood said she did not really know how to describe it, but she could sense the power of nature within a certain range. Hearing this, Kayla guessed that it was probably similar to a map scanning ability in a game. Slayers said that this was an excellent ability for finding dungeons. Wood explained that the range she could currently sense was not very wide. Kyla asked if there was a way to upgrade that range later. Wood said she had heard that if she consumed the dragon insight stone of a dragon that had lived for over 1,000 years, her sensing range could increase by several hundred times. When Kayla heard the shocking word several hundred times, he froze on the spot. Slayers said dragons were already extremely rare, and even if they actually found one, killing it would be almost impossible. Kayla asked if dragons were really that powerful. Slayers said dragons were basically among the top predators in nature, and they also hated demons intensely. Only a tiny number of humans with terrifyingly strong mental power could ever tame a dragon. Kyla let out a cold laugh and said that was truly ironic. The only ones capable of taming dragons were actually the supposedly weak humans. Slayers told them not to think about that, because there was no way they would run into a dragon in a place like this. But the moment she finished speaking, Linlin came screaming toward them with a massive dragon chasing behind her. Everyone was stunned. Once they came back to their senses, they did not hesitate for even a second and immediately turned to run. As they ran, Kayla asked Slayers what was going on. Had she not just said there was no way a dragon would appear here? Slayers said she had no idea either, and she had never seen a dragon this huge before. Not far away, Kudli had followed the remnants of Kyla's aura to the area when she also heard a roar coming from the distance. Kudli stopped and murmured that the sound seemed like a dragon's roar. After running for a while, Kayla's group saw a giant boulder ahead and immediately hid behind it. When the dragon could not find them, it looked around for a while. After confirming that they had truly disappeared, it finally turned and left. Only after making sure the dragon was gone did Slayers roar at Linlin, asking what on earth had happened. She had sent Linlin to pick fruit, yet Linlin had somehow brought back a dragon. Wood looked in the direction the dragon had left and said that judging from its size, it had definitely lived for over 1,000 years. Kayla cried out that this meant, but before he could finish, Kudli continued for him, saying it meant the dragon had an insight stone inside its body. Kayla turned back and agreed, saying this was a perfect opportunity. After saying that, Kyla's group of 4 all looked at Kudli, and the atmosphere instantly fell silent. Slayers was the first to recognize her. Her expression changed as she shouted that Kudli was from White Tarkan. The moment they heard that, Kayla's group immediately stood up and backed away. Then, they drew their weapons and took a fighting stance. According to rumors, this woman was a cold-blooded and infamous mage. When Kyla heard that, he immediately took another step back to create more distance. He had thought that after the Demon King died, he could live peacefully once he escaped the castle. Seeing how tense they were, Cuddly told them to calm down and said there was no need to fight here. That made Kyla extremely confused. Then, Cuddly looked at Slyers and said she should know that fighting here was meaningless, because Cuddly only needed one curse spell to erase all of them. Slyers did not argue. She only clenched her teeth, because she knew very well that this woman was not bluffing. Seeing this, Kayla quickly turned back and asked Slyers if Cuddly was telling the truth. Slyers answered in a low voice that Cuddly was not exaggerating. This woman was stronger than all of them combined. Lin immediately panicked and asked what they should do now. Cuddly said that as long as they came with her quietly, they would not have to die for now. Kyla asked where she wanted to take them. Cuddly replied that she would take them to meet her captain, Killian. The moment Slyers heard that name, cold sweat broke out on her face. She had not expected the captain of humanity's strongest squad to be here as well. Kayla naturally knew that if they really followed Cuddly back, they would probably have no way to survive. So he stopped hesitating and immediately drew his bow and fired. Cuddly saw this and only raised her hand slowly, forming a barrier around herself. Slyers also lifted her staff right away and launched an attack. With several thunderous blasts, both of their attacks were completely blocked by Cuddly. Wood seized the moment when Cuddly's vision was blocked and immediately began controlling the power of nature. The next second, several thick vines burst out of the ground beneath Cuddly's feet. Then the vines rapidly climbed up along her legs. Limlin also coated her palms with magic and charged straight forward. Since she had no ranged attacks, she could only rush in close and slam her fist against the barrier. Seeing this, Slyers immediately shouted for Linlin to come back. But it was already too late. A shard of ice crystal had formed between Cuddly's hands. With a thunderous boom, she tore apart the vines around her and sent Linlin flying at the same time. Then, Cuddly raised her hands again and formed another seal, saying coldly that now she only needed to bring their corpses back. As soon as she finished speaking, countless circular magic arrays appeared behind her, and endless ice spikes began shooting out at high speed. Slyers immediately raised her staff and summoned a protective barrier, wrapping everyone inside. The next second, the ice spikes rained down on the barrier like a storm. Seeing Linlin rush into the shield at the very last second, Kayla finally let out a small breath of relief. Tears welled in Linlin's eyes as she apologized to Kayla, saying she had never been able to help. Slyers shouted for them to hurry up and think of something, because her barrier would not hold for long. Kayla immediately turned back and asked Slyers if she knew that kind of attack curse spell. Slyers said that even if she did, her version would be nowhere near Cuddly's level. While they spoke, the number of ice spikes in the air kept increasing, and their speed grew faster and faster. Before long, cracks began appearing across the barrier. At this rate, in less than a minute, they would be riddled with holes. Kayla's mind began racing, desperately searching for a way out. A few seconds later, his eyes suddenly lit up. He thought of the shadow he had met earlier inside his consciousness. If he could enter that space again and meet it, he might be able to unlock another new skill. With that thought, Kayla clenched his fists and forced the magic inside his body to surge wildly. Slyers saw this and shouted at him, asking what he was doing. She warned him that if he unleashed his power here, the barrier would shatter instantly, but Kayla acted as if he had not heard her at all. Inside, he kept shouting for the shadow to come out. Meanwhile, the dragon that had failed to find them and was about to go back to sleep suddenly heard a rumbling sound from behind it. Sensing the Demon King's power inside Kyla, Cuddly said coldly that it seemed this power only revealed itself when he went all out. She finally understood why she had been unable to track Kayla precisely before. After saying that, she released the ice spikes even faster. Inside the barrier, no matter how hard Kayla forced his magic to circulate, he could not enter that consciousness space. Based on his guess, the shadow would only appear when he was close to death. Finally, under the power of the ice spike curse, the barrier shattered with a sharp crack. Just as they were about to die on the spot, the dragon that had chased them earlier suddenly returned and interrupted Cuddly's spellcasting. This time, however, it only looked down at Kyla's group on the ground and did not attack. Cuddly, hovering in the air, could not understand why the dragon was doing this. Then she formed another seal and continued casting the ice spike curse. When the dragon saw the ice spikes coming, it spread its wings and shielded Kayla's group beneath them. Then it lowered its head in front of Kyla. The instant Kayla looked into its eyes, the dragon's memories began flooding violently into his mind. In those memories, a demon woman sat on the dragon's back, soaring beneath the blue sky. Once the memories became clearer, Kyla finally realized that the demon woman in them was actually his own mother. She and the dragon had lived happily together in the forest every day. After seeing that memory, Kyla loudly asked the dragon if it knew his mother. The dragon only stared at Kayla in silence. After staring at him for more than 10 seconds, it suddenly opened its mouth and spat out a large red pearl. Kayla caught the red pearl instinctively and asked what it was. Only then did the dragon speak, saying that it was its insight stone. Kayla asked again why it would give him something so precious. The dragon said it had no time to explain and told Kayla to hide his magic power and escape from this place immediately. After saying that, the dragon turned back and blasted a blazing pillar of fire straight at Kudli. Kudli immediately stopped her attack and summoned a shield to block it. As she defended herself, she murmured that a dragon helping a group of demons was truly strange. Kayla knew very clearly that with their current strength, they were no match for this mage. So while the dragon held Kudli back, they immediately turned and ran. When Kudli saw them trying to escape, she prepared to stop them. The dragon also saw through her intention. The next second, the dragon breath from its mouth became even more intense. Kudli had no choice but to stabilize the shield in front of her first. Then the eyes she had kept closed began to slowly open a crack. Immediately after that, a massive ice magic array condensed above her head. As Kudli's eyes fully opened, a gigantic iceberg emerged from the magic array. The dragon's eyes widened in horror when it saw the iceberg. In that instant, its thoughts returned to the days it had spent with that demon woman. But before the memory could finish, the iceberg crashed down onto where it stood. Hearing the huge impact behind him, Kayla looked back and felt a sense of dread wash over him. The mighty dragon had been pierced through by the iceberg and was lying on the ground, barely alive. Kudli landed beside the dragon and asked why it had returned to help a group of demons. When the dragon refused to answer, Kudli reached out, preparing to search its memories before it died. The dragon naturally saw through her intention. So before Kudli could act, it burned its own body first. Before dying, the dragon told Kudli that one day she would regret everything she had done. After saying that, it turned into ashes in an instant. During the time the dragon had kept Kudli occupied, Kyla's group had already run far away. As long as Kyla did not use the Demon King's power, Kudli could not lock onto his location. So Kudli clenched her hands and began chanting the spell. Then she raised her hand and released countless magic butterflies into the air. Meanwhile, after Kayla's group escaped Kudli's pursuit range, Slayers immediately asked Kayla what had happened with that dragon. Kayla said that from the dragon's memories, it seemed to have known his mother. Linlin said in shock that normally, dragons could never live peacefully with demons, then asked what Kyla had seen in those memories. Kayla said he did not know the details either. He could only feel that when they were together, they seemed very happy. And the dragon had also given him a red pearl. Without needing to say much, everyone could tell that it was the insight stone, most treasured by dragonkind. Slayers said in a low voice that it seemed they had been saved by the Dragon Queen this time. Looking at the insight stone in his hand, Kayla wondered what relationship that dragon had with his mother. After thinking for a moment, Kayla handed the insight stone to Wood. Slayers told Wood to absorb it quickly. They had already been targeted by White Tarkin, and now they needed the elves' scouting ability to avoid being tracked. Wood looked at the insight stone in her hand and said it was far too precious. Kayla stepped forward and cut her off, saying no one else here had any use for it, so she should swallow it quickly. After hearing that, Wood no longer hesitated and placed the insight stone into her mouth. With a gulp, she swallowed it, and her eyes instantly widened. Then Wood opened her mouth, tilted her head back, and red light began shining from her eyes. Immediately after, the dragon's memories began appearing inside Wood's mind. Through those memories, Wood saw that from the moment the dragon was born, it had become a test subject for humans. Those humans carried out cruel experiments without caring how much pain the dragon endured. Every single day, more wounds would appear on the dragon's body. As generations of humans came and went, they continued tearing the dragon's body apart for experiments. Whenever the dragon was on the verge of death, human mages would heal it, only to begin the torment all over again. Centuries passed like that, and the dragon's mind had long since been shattered. It gave up on everything and no longer cried. But just as it quietly waited for death, the strongest demon king, Tolk Carlton, began invading the human world. During one battle, the laboratory where the dragon was held was blasted apart. And after several hundred years, the dragon finally saw the light of day again. Without the slightest hesitation, it escaped that hellish place. The moment it soared into the sky, it finally felt the freedom of flying once more. After flying for several days, the dragon found others of its kind and told them about human cruelty, even suggesting that dragons should help demons overthrow the human kingdoms. But to its surprise, not a single dragon was willing to believe it, because by then, dragons had already formed close bonds with humans, and were even helping humans fight against demons. Almost no dragon realized that the reason humans could get close to dragonkind was because there had been countless experimental victims just like this dragon. Humans had experimented on dragons to learn how to approach their own kind. Over time, humans had even mastered magic unique to dragons. When the dragon told its kind the truth, it was not trusted. Instead, it was isolated. It tried to turn to the demons, but they also cursed at it and drove it away. From then on, it no longer belonged anywhere. It was not human, not demon, and it could not return to the dragons. For a very long time, the dragon could not understand why it had even been born into this world. So it began cutting itself off from the world. It curled up deep in the shadows, spending every day with endless darkness and loneliness, until one day it met a little demon girl named Callista. The moment that little girl saw the dragon, she called it Mom. That one word left the dragon frozen in place, completely at a loss. The next second, Callista burst into tears. Then she ran over and hugged the dragon's nose. Looking at the girl sobbing so desperately, sweating nervously, the dragon explained that it was not her mother. But from that day on, the dragon seemed to finally find a reason for being in this world. After Callista stopped crying, the dragon used memory transfer magic and saw her memories. In the past, the dragon had been captured by humans for experiments, but Callista had been captured by demons for experiments. Just like the humans, those demons had been using experiments to analyze dragon magic, and by modifying that magic, they hoped to find a way to tame dragons. The moment Callista hatched from her egg, she was immediately taken to the laboratory. Among all the test subjects, Callista had the highest magical potential because from birth, she could use the most difficult dragon transformation spell. After the demons discovered her potential, they intensified the experiments even further. Because of that, every moment of Callista's life was filled with endless pain until one day, in the depths of complete despair, she awakened teleportation magic on her own. And just like that, Callista was sent by her own magic to an unfamiliar place, walking and crying along the way, until today, when she met the dragon who had suffered the same fate. The dragon was deeply moved by Callista's past. After thinking for a moment, it told Callista that it was not her mother. Then it told Callista to call it Master from now on. Callista smiled happily when she heard that and immediately called it Master. From then on, the dragon taught Callista many things. That included the rules by which this world operated and how a dragon could survive in it. After Callista grew a little older, the dragon passed on every spell it knew to her. During that time, the dragon and the demon lived a life that was both happy and fulfilling, and the suffering they had once endured was slowly healed by the time they spent together. However, change always arrived when no one expected it. One day, after Callista returned, the dragon stared at her and suddenly froze. Then it shouted at her, asking who she was and why she had come here. Callista had no idea what was happening and froze in panic. But after shouting at her, the dragon actually breathed fire straight at Callista. That terrified Callista, and she dodged again and again. Normally, dragons were extremely long-lived creatures, but because this dragon had endured too many cruel experiments in its early years, its lifespan had been greatly shortened. Because of that, it could not live as long as other dragons, and its body gradually began showing symptoms of intermittent memory loss. When the dragon finally came back to its senses, it immediately apologized to Callista again and again. Her face full of worry, Callista asked what had happened to it. After the dragon left without saying goodbye, Callista cried her heart out. Meanwhile, the dragon found a place where no one lived. There, it quietly thought back on everything it had shared with Callista and waited for death to arrive. Until a few days ago, when it suddenly sensed Callista's magic power again. Drawn by that power, it began searching. When it saw Kayla, it finally remembered part of its past. That was why it was willing to give up its life to protect Kayla. Because the moment it saw him, it understood everything. Kayla was the son of the disciple it had once cherished. Then, through Kayla's memories, it saw Callista's face again. Only now, Callista was no longer the crying little girl from back then. She had become a mother. When Wood saw this, she felt the dragon's emotions, as if they were her own, and tears welled in her eyes. She felt as if she had just dreamed a very, very long dream, but she could not remember the details of that dream at all. She only told everyone quietly that the dragon had died in peace. After hearing this, Kayla thought that the dragon really had died at the hands of that mage. That day, after Wood swallowed the insight stone she had just received, she said she could not expand her sensing range immediately and would probably need some time to adapt. Kayla thought that without Wood's sensing ability, they could easily walk straight into a human trap. So Kayla asked Slyers to take out the world map. Slyers explained that the red areas on the map were the Demon King's former territory, while the blue areas belonged to humans, and their current location was right on the border between the two territories. After studying the map, Kayla pointed to it and said that heading south seemed like a good choice. Linlin asked in confusion why they didn't head west first and go deeper into demon territory. Kyla said there had to be a deeper reason why his father had sent him to the human territory of Arsal. From what they knew now, one reason was probably so he would meet Slayers, who had been undercover there. And after the Demon King's castle fell, his father might have already foreseen that humans would launch a full-scale invasion into demon territory. Slayers nodded and said Kayla was right. After the Demon King's defeat, it was not just White Tarkan. Almost every human army had taken the chance to enter demon territory. Linlin then said that, since Kyla was the son of the Demon King, should he not return to demon territory and gather the old forces? Kayla said that even if he went back now, those demons would never listen to him. Because right now, he had already been labeled as a coward who ran away, so he had no influence at all. Linlin then looked at Slayers and said she was also the Demon King's daughter, was she not? Slayers explained that because she had spent years undercover in the human world, no one except the Demon King himself could prove that she was his descendant. Besides, while she was undercover in the Tarkan squad, she had also killed many demons. Kayla said the first thing they needed to do now was build a dungeon as their base, then earn achievements one by one until demons willingly chose to follow him. After hearing this, the others all agreed with Kayla's idea. As long as he kept building up achievements, the demons would naturally gather around him again. Kyla would use this method to prove that he was worthy of becoming the Demon King. After saying that, he continued studying the map, searching for a suitable place to build their base. That was the reason he wanted to head south. But the most troublesome problem right now was that Kayla was being hunted by several extremely powerful humans. And at his current level, he was still no match for them. So he needed more information to analyze the situation. In truth, this world had many similarities with the game, whether it was magic terminology or the names of monsters. Everything felt strangely familiar to Kyla. If this world really was connected to the game he had played in his previous life, then he would use the power and status of the Demon King's son to obtain everything he needed, and combine that with his knowledge from his previous life to create a survival strategy for himself. Meanwhile, a fierce battle had erupted inside a certain village. The demons there begged for mercy while shouting that they were willing to side with the humans. But before one of them could finish speaking, a massive creature swallowed him whole, and the one commanding that giant creature was D-Day, one of the members of the Tarkan squad. The village chief rushed over and cursed them furiously, shouting that these demons had already surrendered, so why were they still being exterminated? But before he could finish, Audria gripped her giant axe and split him in half with one swing. After every demon in the village had been wiped out, Karka stood up and reported to their captain. When he turned his head, he saw Kudley's projection appear in front of the captain, telling him that a dragon had protected Kyla's group and helped them escape. However, Kudley also said that she had already released magic butterflies to search everywhere for Kyla's trail. Killian said that location was not far from demon territory, but that guy probably would not return to demon territory while it was still at war. So they would head out first and go to Kudley's current location. A few days later, while fleeing, Kyla suddenly felt the weather grow colder. Slayers explained that they had been running south without stopping for a week, so it was only natural that the temperature had dropped. Kayla thought that they had not run into the Tarkan squad again along the way, and if things could stay like this, that would be perfect, at least until he finished building his dungeon. But before he could finish that thought, the unicorn beneath him suddenly stopped. As an elf, Wood understood the unicorn's thoughts and said they were refusing to continue forward. These unicorns could sense that they would not be able to survive in the environment ahead. So at Kayla's signal, Wood thanked the unicorns and said goodbye to them. After the unicorns left, Linlin shivered uncontrollably from the cold, complaining that in weather like this, both humans and demons would have a hard time surviving. Kayla said that was exactly why this place was perfect. Not far away, the unicorns were on their way back, and they happened to be spotted by one of Kudley's magic butterflies. Kudley thought that unicorns were naturally afraid of the cold, so why had they come back from the south? And why were there exactly 4 of them? After Kayla's group walked for a while, they saw an isolated island ahead. Kayla thought the place looked good, so he asked Wood if she could check whether there were any people or monsters on the island. Wood said her mind's eye only reacted to nature and could not directly detect living beings. Slayers saw a battered old boat by the shore and judged that no one had gone to the island for quite some time. After that, Slayers used magic to start the old boat, carrying everyone toward the island. The distance from the shore to the island was roughly 200 meters. It was not far, but the water was very deep, and the waves were fierce. And, judging by the terrain, if anyone invaded the island, they would be easy to detect in advance. After searching for a while, Kyla's group discovered a large cave. Before entering, Kayla had Slayers cast illusion magic over the cave entrance. That way, from the outside, this place would look like an ordinary mountainside. Not long after entering the cave, the group came across a fork in the path. Seeing this, Kayla asked Wood to scout what lay ahead. Wood said there was a narrow passage on both the left and right sides. After passing through them, each path led into a wide room, and then the passages narrowed again. At the end, the two paths merged into a larger space, and deeper inside, there was an even more hidden chamber. As she spoke, Wood drew the route she had sensed on the ground. After thinking it over, Kayla decided they should split into two groups, explore both passages, and meet up again in the central area. The moment Slyers heard that, she grabbed Kayla and said she wanted to go with him. Linlin saw this and quickly grabbed Kayla too, saying she also wanted to go with him. Then, she turned back and explained that danger might appear ahead, so the two strongest members should split up. Slyers thought that made sense, so she went with Wood into the other passage. After entering the passage, Wood noticed small points of light flickering inside. She looked up and realized the light was coming from several stones. Slyers explained that these stones were called light stones, created by combining ice magic and light magic. Since they were still glowing though, they had to have been made by an extremely skilled mage. After explaining that, Slyers suddenly turned back to Wood and said she still did not trust her. Wood froze for a moment and asked what she meant. Slyers said she was willing to travel with Wood because Kayla had chosen her. But Slyers was not the kind of person who easily accepted new companions. Wood sighed and said that if Slyers did not want to treat her as a companion, then she could just treat Wood as a slave. Slyers stayed silent for a minute or two, then only said that she did not like Wood before turning around and continuing forward. On the other side, when Kayla walked up to a stone, Linlin immediately rushed forward and reminded him to be careful. Seeing how fired up Linlin looked, Kayla wondered why she was suddenly so motivated. After walking a little farther, the two suddenly heard movement ahead. Kayla looked down and realized it was a slime. In the past, he had only seen slimes in the game. Now that he was seeing one in real life, it was even cuter than the game version. He really wanted to reach out and pet it. But before Kayla could do anything, Linlin rushed forward first and punched the slime to death. Then, she tore it into countless pieces. After finishing all that, Linlin turned back and looked at Kayla excitedly. Kayla wondered if she was asking him for praise. So to satisfy her, Kayla gritted his teeth and praised her, saying she was really strong and had done a good job. Just as Linlin burst into laughter, she suddenly felt the ground tremble beneath her feet. Immediately after, the surrounding stones began gathering together and finally formed a giant golem. Seeing this, Kayla immediately signaled for Linlin to retreat. But Linlin did not step back. Instead, she took a step forward and stood in front of Kayla. As soon as Linlin charged in, the golem punched her away. She slammed hard into the wall behind her and spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Kayla urgently shouted for her to run, because without weapons, they had no way to defeat that thing. But after getting back up, Linlin gathered magic in her palm again and charged forward once more. Yet the result was exactly the same as before. She could not deal any damage to the golem. Instead, she was punched away by the golem again. After taking that blow, Linlin endured the pain, steadied herself, and stood in front of the golem once more. Kayla shouted and asked why she was forcing herself like this. Linlin said that if she backs down, she would no longer be worthy of being his attendant. After saying that, Linlin gritted her teeth, and her memories drifted back to the past. She remembered the first time she entered the Demon King's castle. Back then, when the original Kayla saw her, he ran crying to his father and said he wanted to become friends with Linlin. His father asked Kayla if he was joking. An attendant was an attendant. Then he urged Kayla to hurry up and form a master-servant contract with Linlin. Back then, the original Kayla had been far too weak and did not dare resist his father at all. So in the end, he had no choice but to use the contract on Linlin. But Linlin thanked Kayla because he had wanted to treat her as a friend instead of just an attendant, and that made her incredibly happy. For the first time, Linlin felt that she had finally been recognized as a real person. From that moment on, she told herself she would work extremely hard. She also secretly swore that she would help Kayla become the greatest Demon King. But as time passed, Linlin realized that Kayla was actually a crybaby coward who was always beaten to the brink of death by his siblings. And if Kayla truly died, Linlin would be executed along with him. So in order to make Kayla stronger, she began acting cold and strict. But even then, Kayla never changed his cowardly nature. And because of Kayla, Linlin was discriminated against and bullied by the other mates. Every time she ate, she was forced to eat other people's scraps. Some even poured magma on her body. When she slept, she could only sleep in stables and pig pens. Even so, the other attendants still came to torment her from time to time. Those attendants would even take revenge on Linlin just because their own masters had given her a second glance. Every day of Linlin's life was like hell. It was probably from that time onward that she began to resent Kayla. Because of the contract, if Kyla died, she would die with him, so she even thought they might as well die together. But when the dagger cut through Kayla's main artery, his powerful self-healing ability quickly restored his body. That discovery completely broke Linlin inside. Now, she could not even die if she wanted to. And the original Kayla only cried and kept saying sorry again and again. Then, one day, Linlin suddenly felt that Kayla had changed overnight. Not only did he dare to resist his siblings, but he also unleashed overwhelming power. That made Linlin's dead heart come back to life. In Kyla, she seemed to see the makings of a future demon king. But along this journey, she had barely helped at all. She felt like nothing but dead weight, and she did not want to keep holding Kayla back. With that thought, Linlin shot forward and rushed in front of the golem, then drove both hands deep into its neck. As she poured all her magic power into her hands and unleashed her strength, she actually tore the golem's head off by force. When Linlin landed, Kyla was completely stunned. He had never expected her to unleash such brutal combat power. Linlin stood up and looked at Kayla, tears welling up in her eyes, as she said she did not want to be abandoned. Just as Kayla was about to step forward and comfort her, the headless golem actually continued moving. Linlin heard the sound behind her and felt her heart skip a beat. She wanted to dodge, but there was no strength left in her body. At the critical moment, Kyla clenched his fist and gathered his magic power. Then he struck out with one palm, slamming it into the golem. After taking the hit head-on, the golem stumbled several steps before collapsing to the ground. Right after that, Kayla stepped forward and caught Linlin's swaying body, asking if she was an idiot. How could he possibly abandon an attendant like her? Linlin froze for a moment and called him Master. Kyla continued, saying that even if Linlin tried to run away one day, he would not let her go. From now on, she could only stay by his side. Hearing that, Linlin immediately began sobbing. Then she threw herself into Kayla's arms and cried out loud. Through the memories between the original Kayla and Linlin, Kayla could feel that her emotions were real. For the sake of the future, Kyla had to make Linlin the strongest attendant. Meanwhile, in the other passage, Slyers discovered that there was treasure here. Without a second thought, she picked up a piece of jewelry, put it around her neck, and asked Wood if it looked good. Wood replied expressionlessly that it did. That made Slyers curl her lips slightly. Wood was way too dry. If Linlin were here, she would definitely be kissing up to her. As Slyers thought this, she walked a little farther, and soon saw several glittering things lying on the ground. She rushed forward to check, and realized they were all precious jewels. Wood called Slyers' name from behind, and Slyers immediately stood up and said she was not sharing the jewels with Wood. Wood asked whether Slyers truly did not know or was only pretending not to know. Slyers was just about to ask what Wood meant when she suddenly noticed that the bracelet on her wrist had started shrinking rapidly. The necklace around her neck also began tightening. Realizing something was wrong, Slyers cursed inwardly. Then she turned and saw a huge monster slowly walking out from the darkness. Slyers said she had felt something was off about the jewels earlier, but she had not expected a treasure spider to be hiding here. Then she shouted at Wood, asking why Wood had not stopped her if she had already seen through it. Wood replied that she had thought Slyers already knew something was wrong and had another plan, so she had simply kept observing. After saying that, Wood summoned vines first and blocked the treasure spider's attack. Slyers thought that normally, this kind of monster would be nothing to her, but now she had been careless. Her hands were bound, and she could not even take out her staff. With no other choice, she could only place her hopes on Wood for now. With that in mind, Slyers shouted that she had only pretended to be caught to test Wood. Now that Slyers was trapped, what would Wood do? She told Wood to go all out and pass this trial. Wood heard this and stepped forward, drawing the dagger at her waist. She came up to Slyers and struck the bracelet with a sharp clang. Slyers immediately reminded her that items created by a treasure spider could not be destroyed through ordinary physical methods. Just as Wood stared at the bracelet and tried to think of another solution, the treasure spider opened its mouth and spat out a large amount of green slime. Wood did not dare hesitate. She grabbed Slyers and flashed backward. Slyers warned her that it was ultra-concentrated acid, and the body would melt instantly if it touched even a little. Wood dodged while asking what they should do now, but then she accidentally tripped over a stone and sent Slyers flying out of her arms. The treasure spider seized the chance and shot out a web. The web was so fast that Slyers could not even see what it was before she was stuck to the wall. The next second, the treasure spider flashed in front of her and thrust its front claw toward her. Fortunately, Wood appeared in time. and used her own body to block the attack, saving Slayers. Immediately after that, Wood quickly drew her dagger and slashed across the treasure spider's front claw. With its front claw severed, the treasure spider shrieked in pain and retreated again and again. Wood seized that opening, gritted her teeth, and pulled the spider's claw out of her own body. Then, she turned and stabbed that claw into the bracelet Slayers was wearing. With a sharp snap, the bracelet that had seemed indestructible actually broke apart. After the treasure spider recovered, it let out a shriek and charged at Wood again. It was too fast for Wood to dodge, so she had no choice but to take the hit head-on. Even so, Wood still stood firmly in front of Slayers, without moving an inch. Now that her hands were free again, Slayers immediately summoned her staff. Then, with a dark expression, she pointed the staff at the treasure spider. Once her magic finished gathering, she fired a beam of purple light. The instant the treasure spider touched that light, flames erupted across its body. Before long, its upper body was burned into ash. At that moment, Wood finally could not hold herself up anymore and collapsed to the ground. Slayers asked her how she knew the treasure spider's own claw could break the magic on the bracelet. Wood said she had only guessed that the treasure spider's own body would probably be immune to its own magic. Slayers said that if Wood had guessed wrong just now, she would have lost her life. Wood lifted her head and said she did not care about life or death because Slayers had told her to go all out. Looking at Wood like this, Slayers froze for a moment. She remembered the days when she had trained with the Tarkin squad. Back then, after being stabbed through the body, she had grabbed the blade barehanded. Then the corner of her mouth lifted slightly as she looked at the opponent in front of her. The next second, with a clean slash, she cut off his head. It was that willingness to risk her life without fearing death that caught her instructor's attention. The instructor pointed out that if the sword had pierced her heart instead, she would have died. Slayers said she did not care about life or death because the instructor had ordered her to go all out and kill him. After hearing that, the instructor made an exception and passed her on the spot. And now, Slayers saw her past self in Wood. So just like her instructor back then, she told Wood that she had passed the test. From now on, Slayers would treat Wood as a companion, and Wood had to be more careful and not die so easily. Wood heard this and said seriously that she would remember it. Not long after, Kayla and Slayers' group finally reunited after their battles. Once they met up, Kyla told Slayers that his side had encountered a giant golem. Slayers said they had run into a treasure spider, and that those two types of monsters appearing in the same dungeon was not common at all. After looking around, Kayla said the structure here was somewhat similar to the Demon King's castle, and he could also see traces of human architectural techniques. But what caught his attention most was the statue in the center of the room. The box beneath the statue looked completely out of place in this room, making it extremely suspicious. Linlin, who was healing nearby, stared at it and exclaimed that it looked like a treasure chest. When Slayers heard that, she immediately smiled and said Linlin really did have a good eye, then rushed toward the box without even looking back. But at that moment, the statue's eyes suddenly flashed with golden light. Kayla instantly pulled out his bow and shouted for Slayers to wait. Seeing that it was already too late, Kayla did not hesitate and fired an arrow immediately. At the same time, two laser beams shot out from the statue's eyes. Fortunately, Kayla's magic arrow arrived in time and blocked the attack for Slayers. Linlin and Wood cried out in shock, asking if this was also a trap. Kyla cursed and asked if that was not obvious enough. But before he could finish speaking, the statue fired two more laser beams. Slayers dodged while immediately summoning her staff into her hand. Linlin and Wood saw the fight break out and also tried to stand up and help. Kayla shouted for them to stay where they were. They had not recovered yet, and coming over now would only get in the way. After hearing that, Wood obediently sat back down and continued healing. Linlin turned and snapped at her, asking if she was really not going to help. Wood replied that she had received an order from Slayers not to die easily, so she would follow Kayla's instructions and focus on recovering. Linlin realized she had no way to argue and could only sit back down to keep recovering. Meanwhile, after firing several magic arrows in a row, Kayla shouted for Slayers to attack the statue's main body while he drew its attention. As soon as Kayla finished speaking, several arrows shot toward the statue, but they were all blocked by its barrier. Slayers also swung her staff and released fireball magic. But while the statue blocked their magical attacks, it fired lasers from its eyes again. Slayers cried out that this statue was using barrier magic and attack magic at the same time. Kyla frowned and said there was no way an ordinary statue could cast multiple spells like that. Slayers kept attacking while analyzing the situation. There were only two possibilities. The first was that a high-level mage had loaded those spells into the statue in advance. The second was that something inside the statue was actively casting the spells. Hearing that, Kayla immediately turned to Wood and asked if she could scan the statue's internal structure. Wood used the power of nature to investigate, then told Kayla that the statue was hollow. After hearing that, Kayla realized it was probably the second possibility Slyers had mentioned. When the lasers shot toward them again, Slyers summoned a shield and said they had to break the statue's defense first, telling Kayla to try everything he could. Kayla said that if even Slyers' magic could not do it, how was he supposed to? While they were talking, several stone figures suddenly leapt out from the walls, and on Slyers' side, an even larger treasure spider appeared. The next second, Slyers raised her staff and released purple fire. But when the flames touched the spider, it didn't even leave a scratch. Seeing that purple fire had no effect, Slyers immediately realized that the monster in front of her had to be the treasure spider mother. Taking advantage of her brief hesitation, the treasure spider mother quickly swung its front claws and attacked her. While dodging, Slyers thought that if this were not such an enclosed space, she would have wiped all these things out with wide-range magic long ago. Kylo was not doing much better either. The stone figures kept forcing him back. If he used the Demon King's power now, he could easily deal with them. But if he did that, the Tarkin squad hunting them would immediately detect his location. With that in mind, Kayla looked back at the statue in the center. Ever since those monsters appeared, the statue seemed to have stopped attacking. Could it be that the statue was using its magic to control the monsters, leaving its main body unable to keep attacking? And those monsters had only appeared after Slyers told Kayla to attack the statue with everything he had. In other words, the statue might have sensed danger from Slyers' words and summoned the monsters in response. So Kayla immediately told Slyers that their main target was still the statue and asked her to buy him some time. Slyers asked what he was planning to do, but even as she asked, she didn't stop casting for a second. As she released Firewall spell, the stone figures were all blocked off. Kayla seized the opening, kicked off the ground, and charged toward the statue. He guessed that if the statue could no longer attack, then its barrier must have failed too. Kayla threw a punch, and sure enough, it landed solidly at the statue's base. But the force was too great. Unable to stop himself, he punched straight through the statue and crashed inside. Strangely, the stone figures did not come to stop Kayla. Instead, they kept charging towards Slyers. The treasure spider mother in the distance, however, suddenly turned back and rushed toward the statue. Seeing this, Wood immediately said that only the spider was small enough to get inside the statue. As soon as she finished speaking, two stone figures noticed them and slowly walked over. But Linlin and Wood had not fully recovered from their injuries yet. Fortunately, Slyers pulled herself away in time and summoned a shield. With a thunderous boom, the stone figure slammed its fist directly into the shield. Slyers told Linlin and Wood not to panic. Right now, the only thing they could do was trust Kayla. Meanwhile, inside the statue, Kayla looked up and saw a glowing object above him. He guessed that it might be the core controlling the statue, so he immediately took out his bow and prepared to destroy it. But before Kayla could fire the arrow, he suddenly heard a sharp hiss. The next second, his entire body was wrapped tightly by silk shot out by the treasure spider. Because the treasure spider was small, it only needed to widen the opening slightly before crawling into the statue after him. Outside, after taking one heavy attack after another, Slyers shouted that they were almost at their limit and told Kayla to hurry. But Kayla was now bound by spider silk and could not move at all. The treasure spider also raised its front claw, ready to take his life. Just as Kayla thought he had no choice but to use the Demon King's power, the shadow inside his consciousness suddenly cursed at him. With that furious shout, Kayla returned to the consciousness space again. The moment the shadow saw him, it pointed at him angrily and asked why he was letting such a weak monster devour him. Kayla roared back, asking why it had only appeared now when he had nearly died moments ago. The shadow called him an idiot and asked why he was not using the power of subjugation, saying that no matter how weak Kayla was, he was still capable of controlling a monster of this level. Kayla froze for a moment and asked if it meant the master-servant contract he had made with Linlin when he was a child. The shadow immediately retorted, "Of course not, idiot." Hearing it insult him again, Kayla snapped back at it. The shadow sighed and said that Kayla carried the blood of the great demon kings passed down through generations. Every great demon king had possessed the power to command demons. As long as his desire was strong enough, that power would reveal itself. Kayla asked in confusion what he was supposed to do. The shadow said he needed to make his enemy submit to his overwhelming will and release the greed engraved in his bloodline. After hearing that explanation, Kayla finally seemed to understand something. If he was the Demon King, then every monster within reach of his power should belong to him. Only he could lead them to victory. With that thought, Kayla felt as if a seal inside his body was slowly coming undone. When his consciousness returned to reality, purple light flashed in his left eye. The moment the treasure spider saw that light, it froze in place. Then, the blue crystal above its head slowly began turning purple. In his heart, Kyla shouted that he was Kyla Carlton, the descendant of the great Demon King, and that he would completely rule over it here and now. He declared that from this moment on, the treasure spider belonged to him. As soon as he made that declaration, the crystal above the treasure spider's head turned completely purple. Its front claw, which had been suspended in midair, also stopped moving. At the same time, a slot-like interface appeared in front of Kayla, and the treasure spider appeared in the first slot. After observing it for a moment, Kayla realized that this thing looked just like an inventory from a game, and now he could clearly feel that the treasure spider completely obeyed his commands. It belonged to Kayla now. Outside, just as Slayer's barrier was about to shatter, Kayla controlled the treasure spider and made it rush toward the top level of the statue. Seeing that time was running out, Kayla leapt forward and arrived directly in front of the blue energy body. Then he used his demon control ability on the energy body as well. The next second, the crystal above the energy body also began slowly turning purple. Soon, just like the treasure spider, it became Kayla's subordinate. Outside, all the golems attacking Slayers stopped moving at once. Inside the barrier, Lin looked completely confused and had no idea what had happened. Wood was the first to spot Kayla and shouted for everyone to look. Everyone followed the direction of Wood's finger and saw Kayla beneath the statue, sitting on the treasure spider's back while holding a purple slime in his hands. Kayla had not expected the master of this dungeon to be nothing more than a slime. It seemed that the slime had definitely been enhanced by a high-level mage. This was also the first time Kayla had touched a real slime since coming to this world. Its soft, squishy texture was exactly as he had imagined. After hearing Kayla's explanation, Slayer said she had never heard of such an ability before. It was probably because she did not possess the complete Demon King bloodline. Lin was also extremely shocked by Kayla's new skill. Kayla said that now that the master of this dungeon belonged to him, building their own dungeon from here on would become much easier. After saying that, Kayla gave the purple slime a name, Stone. Slayers, standing nearby, said she wanted that demon controlling ability too. They were both children of the Demon King, so why was Kayla the only one who could use it? Only Wood sensed that something was off. She said this slime must have been created by a high-level mage, so where had that mage gone? Lin said the dungeon was already this old, and the golems were badly worn down too, so that person had probably moved away long ago. Slayer said those mages might also have died in battle against humans. As he listened to their discussion, Kayla looked at Stone in his hands and fell into deep thought. What confused him most was still the identity of that shadow inside his consciousness. If that shadow had not appeared several times, he might have died long ago. So now, Kayla desperately wanted to know how he could meet it again. But after thinking back on the 2 times he had seen it, he still could not find any clear clue, so he simply set the matter aside for now. The most important task right now was to build a dungeon that truly belonged to him. After making Stone his subordinate, Kayla had also taken control of all the demon monsters it commanded. To prevent the Tarkon squad from discovering him, Kayla deployed scouting posts in every corner around the island. At the island's entrance, he secretly placed a large number of small spiders. Inside the passages, he hid many gargoyles. As for the larger golems and the treasure spider mother, Kayla temporarily left them in the main hall. After arranging all of this, Kayla walked to the large chest beneath the statue. When he opened the chest, he took out 2 daggers and handed them to Lin. Slayers said these weapons could make demon power more condensed and much stronger. That meant Lin would no longer need to coat her bare hands with demon power when fighting. If she could master these 2 daggers, her combat power would rise to a completely new level. After hearing this, Lin secretly made up her mind to practice hard, so she could protect Kayla and keep him safe from humans. Next, Wood took a shield out of the chest. Lin glanced at it and said it was just an old wooden shield. But Wood said the surface of the shield was always moist, and she could feel the power of nature inside it. So, Kayla assigned the shield to Wood. Slayers took a magic book from the chest. When it was Kayla's turn to choose, Slayers pointed to a longsword nearby and told him to pick that one, because it contained the strongest magic power. Kayla glanced at that longsword after hearing her, but soon his eyes fell on the longsword with the purple hilt in front of him. The next second, Kayla picked it up and said he would choose this one. Slayers asked in confusion why he wanted it, since it looked like the weakest weapon among them. What they did not know was that Kayla chose it because it looked very similar to the weapon he had once used in the game. It felt like reuniting with an old companion he had not seen in a very long time. After the weapons were distributed, Kayla began drawing the dungeon renovation map. However, this island was extremely barren, and there were not many usable materials. Fortunately, basic building materials like soil, stone, and river water could still be found. Next, they used Wood's architectural knowledge to design the structure, while Slayers used magic to combine materials and handle construction. They combined the architectural knowledge of the underground demon castle and the city of Arsal to gradually build this dungeon. The conditions here were extremely harsh, but this was the first dungeon Kyla had built with his own hands, perhaps his final place of retreat. After the main hall was renovated, Kyla took out Stone and asked if it liked its new home. Seeing Stone bounce around happily, Kayla also smiled with relief. Meanwhile, above the island, a blue magic butterfly quietly flew into the area. At the same time, in Arsal, the mages were rushing to repair the damaged city. Inside a room, the ruler of the city was thanking Hayden for bringing support. But Hayden said this was not the time for polite words. Who could have imagined that Arsal, a direct state of Terulia, would fall into such disgrace? The ruler quickly apologized and explained that everyone had been immersed in the festive celebration that day. But before he could finish, Hayden angrily cut him off. Hayden said Arsal was a kingdom known for magic, yet it had been reduced to this state by a traitor and the Demon King's weakest son. Then, Hayden ordered them to immediately gather the strongest elemental mages. The king himself would grant them Teruya enhancement stones, and Hayden would personally train these enhanced mages. The ruler stammered that he had heard White Tarkan was already involved in this matter. So why did Arsal's mages need to participate as well? Hayden said coldly that even White Tarkan had not confirmed that group's location yet. If Arsal's mages found them first and eliminated them, would that not restore Arsal's reputation, which had already fallen to rock bottom? The ruler grew even more nervous and stammered that using enhancement stones would bring deadly side effects. Hayden's mouth twisted into a vicious sneer as he said that even at a time like this, the elder was still haggling over such minor details. Then Hayden raised his hand and released his magic power, lifting the old man into the air. He said coldly that the elder seemed to have forgotten something. The one who brought him to Arsal and put him in that position was Hayden, and if Hayden could raise him up, he could also make him disappear without a trace. Hayden needed a reason to keep receiving support from the king, so the elder had better stop talking back and summon the elemental mages immediately. After giving the elder his orders, Hayden walked alone through the plaza of Arsal. He thought that if White Tarkan found Kayla's group first, he would probably be killed on the spot. So this time, he had to make his move before White Tarkan did. Just then, a man in black walked over from the side and called out to him. He asked if Hayden was looking for Kayla. Before Hayden could answer, the man calmly said that he could help Hayden find him. Meanwhile, on the island, the others found a chair for Kayla. Kayla wondered if the chair looked a little too luxurious because anyone who saw it might think he was some kind of demon king. Linlin immediately said that Kyla would definitely become the demon king one day, so only a throne like this was worthy of him. Slayers said that right now, they only had fish to eat, but as the demon king's heir, Kayla still needed a balanced diet. The moment Linlin heard that, she slammed the table and stood up, saying Kayla needed something better to eat right now. She volunteered to hunt in a more remote area. Kyla rejected her suggestion immediately, because doing that would make it too easy for White Tarkan to find them, and it was far too dangerous. Although he said that out loud, after eating fish for several days straight, Kayla felt sick just looking at fish. What he really wanted now was a bite of meat. At that moment, Wood stood up and said she could try hunting some animals nearby. Slayers asked in confusion if the surroundings were not all water, so where would any animals come from? Wood then brought everyone to an open area, took out her shield, and explained to Kyla that she had recently discovered the shield had life force, so she could synchronize with it using her elven power. After hearing her explanation, Kayla instantly understood. She was using the shield to root into the ground and search for underground animals. It was similar to fishing, and for it to succeed, the roots had to creep slowly and silently. And just like that, 2 hours passed, but they caught nothing. 4 hours passed, and they still had nothing. When 6 hours had passed, Linlin finally could not hold back and asked Wood if this thing really worked. Just then, Wood seemed to sense something, and her pupils suddenly shrank. The next second, she gripped the shield with both hands and pulled with all her strength. In an instant, a huge mole-like animal was yanked out of the ground. Slayers gasped in surprise that it was actually a giant mole, then praised Wood for doing a great job. Hearing Slayers praise her for the first time, Wood's face turned slightly red, but Kyla looked at the huge creature and asked if this thing was really edible. When Linlin saw that Wood had actually caught something, she inwardly panicked. At this rate, she was going to lose to the newcomer again. So, Linlin quickly stepped forward, lifted the mole onto her back, and said she would turn it into a delicious meal. After eating fish for several days, they had finally caught an animal with meat. But after Linlin tied up the mole, she suddenly ran into trouble. because she realized the mole's hide was too thick, and her claws could not pierce it at all. She originally wanted to go back and ask Wood for help, but after taking a few steps, she stopped. Linlin thought that if she could not even handle such a small task, Kyla would definitely be disappointed in her, so she took out the 2 daggers she had just received. Following what Slayers had told her, Linlin began channeling her own magic power into the daggers. But halfway through, the 2 daggers began floating upward, out of control, and they kept absorbing the magic power inside Linlin's body. When Linlin tried to throw the daggers away, she found that they were stuck firmly to her hands. Linlin realized that if this continued, she would eventually be drained dry sooner or later. Meanwhile, Slayers sat on the sofa, reading the magic book they had just obtained from the treasure chest. She could tell that this magic book had been made inside the dungeon. It recorded information about the dungeon, as well as basic spells related to its internal properties. Although most of the spells inside were basic magic, Slayers saw many terms she had never encountered before, and could not tell what level the author of the book had reached. When Slayers flipped to the middle section, something on the page made her eyes widen in shock. Suddenly, Linlin's shout came from the kitchen nearby. Wood was about to get up and check, but Slayers stopped her and said to let Linlin handle it herself. Wood reminded her that Linlin had just screamed. Slayers said she was only cooking, so just let her be. In the kitchen, after the daggers had drained part of her magic, Linlin fought against the urge to collapse, desperately telling herself that she had to find a way to control these 2 daggers. Back in the Demon King's castle, whenever the original Kyla attended class, Linlin often watched from the side. Back then, in order to support Kayla better, she had carefully memorized every detail of every lesson. Somewhere in those memories, there had to be a way to control the daggers. After trying hard to remember, Linlin finally recalled that one day, the teacher had said magical weapons were far stronger than ordinary weapons. But if the user lacked the ability to control them, they were useless. In short, to wield a magical weapon, one first had to grasp its true nature. If someone did not want to be controlled by their own magic, they had to shape that magic into the form they desired. In battle, most people might only release a small amount of magical power, but with extreme focus, they could create a miracle. With that thought, Linlin began focusing her mind, matching her magic power to the true nature of the daggers, and trying to manifest it. Then, she controlled the output of her magic, slowly shaping it into the form of the blades. After several attempts, Linlin was shocked to discover that her magic had truly synchronized with the daggers. But this level was still far from enough, so she began increasing the intensity of her magic output. Once she reached the maximum level she could endure, Linlin shouted and swung the dagger down at the mole. The mole's skin, which had been hard as steel moments ago, was now pierced as easily as tissue paper. Seeing that she had actually succeeded, Linlin froze for a moment. She realized that the daggers were no longer draining the magic power from her body. With that thought, Linlin pulled the dagger out of the mole. The magic power that had been absorbed earlier had transformed into energy around the blades. At that moment, Linlin felt as if the weapons had become one with her. Outside, Kayla noticed Linlin had been inside for quite a while without coming out. Worried that something had happened, he stood up and walked toward the kitchen. Just then, the kitchen door opened and Linlin walked out carrying a plate of steak. Seeing this, Kayla immediately asked what that scream from earlier had been about. Linlin broke into a cold sweat. She thought there was no way she could let Kyla know how embarrassing her situation had been, so she lied and said nothing had happened. Slayers noted that Linlin had been 10 times faster than she had expected, then asked if Linlin had some special talent for controlling sword aura. Linlin froze and asked what Slayers meant. Slayers raised the magic book and said it contained records about this type of mole. The creature's skin was extremely tough. According to the book, it was almost invincible underground, and only a swordsman capable of wielding powerful sword aura could cut through its hide. Linlin was shocked and said that she had indeed felt the mole's skin was like steel. Wood also stepped forward and praised Linlin, saying she was truly amazing. Kyla reached out and touched Linlin's cheek, praising her for doing a great job and saying he would enjoy the meal properly. Those words instantly made Linlin blush deeply. She felt that she had finally earned Kyla's approval, and she secretly vowed to keep growing stronger and support him until he became the true Demon King. Seeing Linlin's growth, Slayers showed a relieved smile. At the same time, she thought back to the battle against the Earth Demons and the time they spent clearing this dungeon. Back then, she had barely helped at all, and the fact that the terrain prevented her from using wide-range magic could not be an excuse. So she needed to learn powerful magic that could be used in any situation. In the days that followed, Slayers shut herself away and studied new magic desperately. She knew very well that the Demon King had sent Kayla to Arsal so that she could support him. But if White Tarkin found them now, with her current strength, she would struggle even to protect Kayla. So for now, she had to break through to become a fourth circle mage. After all, Kudli, who had hunted them earlier, had most likely already reached the sixth circle. With that thought, Slayers took out a piece of earth ore. The earth demons had previously consumed this very thing to increase their strength at the cost of their lifespan. And in order to grow stronger in a short time and complete the mission the Demon King had entrusted to her, Slayers decided to eat it as well. But just then, the magic book beside her suddenly emitted a brilliant golden light. Slayers sensed something strange and turned to look. Her eyes widened instantly, because the magic book had begun flipping its own pages. Before she could react, the golden light inside the book began resonating with the magic power around her. 2.5 seconds later, that golden light condensed into glowing characters. Slayers looked closely and realized these were the very characters in the book that she had been unable to understand. Immediately after that, a pillar of light shot out from the golden characters. In the blink of an eye, it rushed towards Slayers' lower abdomen. At such close range, Slayers had no time to dodge. The instant the golden light struck her, her consciousness entered a vast void. Just as Slayers looked around in confusion, wondering where she was, a black-clad witch suddenly appeared behind her and said that Slayers possessed the Demon King's power, and through cycles of reincarnation, she had finally arrived here. Slayers guessed that perhaps she had inherited part of her Demon King father's magic power, which was why the magic book had reacted. So she asked who the witch was and whether she had followed Demon King Hell. The black-clad witch said no. Slayers then asked why the magic book had reacted to the Demon King's magic power. The witch answered that she had once served Tulk, the one true god of this world. Slayers gasped in disbelief, asking if Tulk was not the former Demon King. After all, he had once been known as the strongest being on the continent. The black-clad witch looked at the stunned Slayers and said that this meeting might be the will of fate. She had been waiting here for countless years. After taking a moment to calm herself, Slayers asked if this dungeon had been built by Tulk. The witch said that they had once traveled through many places and left dungeons behind in each of them, so that those who came later could experience true enlightenment. Hearing this, Slayers instantly understood that their arrival at this dungeon had not been a coincidence. So she asked the witch to travel with them and lend them her strength, then told her that the current Demon King, Hell, had already been slain in battle. The witch said that she was not a real living being right now. She was only a remnant magic activated by specific conditions, so she could only help the person who had awakened her. Hearing that, Slayers immediately asked how she could become stronger. Only by becoming strong enough could she protect Kayla, the descendant of Tulk. The witch first said she liked Slayers' direct request. Although she could help, a mage who wanted to break through the circles ultimately had to rely on herself. The method: allow the agony of death to tear through every inch of her body. Only those who endured it could forge reincarnation. Hearing this, Slayers immediately knelt and begged for the opportunity. The witch continued, saying that once it began, the pain would last as long as 14 years in the real world. If Slayers could not endure it midway, she would die. When Slayers heard the word death, her brow tightened slightly. But the next second, she thought of Demon King Hell and Kayla. So she shouted that if she could not protect the Demon King's heir now, then her existence had already lost all meaning. After seeing that, Slayers told the witch to begin. The witch slowly raised her hand and formed a magic array, saying good. She had felt Slayers' sincere will. Next, she would dismantle every spell Slayers had learned so far, and reconstruct her from the foundation with her own magic. As soon as the witch finished speaking, a heart-piercing pain spread through Slayers' entire body. It was a pain and terror unlike anything Slayers had ever felt before. But for the sake of her goal, she forced herself to endure, and refused to pass out. Only after Slayers gradually adapted to that pain did the witch truly begin. The next second, a pain several times more intense than before surged through her entire body again.